The Two Mics, simulcast across the UK on Talk Sport and Talk Radio.
Good morning, I'm Mike Graham, he's Mike Parry. You're listening to the Two Mics here on Talk Sport. It's a sombre night as news continues to come in from Manchester that police have a number of confirmed fatalities after an explosion at the MEN Arena around 3 hours ago. Police are treating what happened at the Ariana Grande concert as a possible terrorist incident. We'll bring you the developments as we get them throughout the course of the night. The scenes outside the biggest indoor concert venue in Europe are still somewhat chaotic, but it's clear that this is a very serious, shocking and tragic incident. We'll be bringing you all the news as we get it, of course, as soon as we can confirm the details. The police have been quite cagey about it, as you might expect at the moment. 08717 22 3344. We'll also be talking football as well. David Moyes, John Terry, Wayne Rooney and Ross Barkley are all names that will be addressed in the next 3 hours. You're listening to the Two Mics with me, Mike Graham, and Mike Parry on Talk Sport. This is Talk Sport. We are the Two Mics, and it's not really the right time to say welcome to the show, I suppose, because there's some very, very serious stuff going on up in Manchester.
Yes.
But Mr. Parry is here. Very good morning to you, Mr. Parry.
Yeah, good morning, Mike.
And what have you made of it so far? It's been an unusually kind of quiet, in terms of information, incident, hasn't it?
Well, look, the main fact we know at the moment is that a lot of people are dead.
Yeah.
Upwards of 20 people have been killed in this incident. So somewhere in Manchester there's going to be a mortuary full of excuse me, people who've died, and every person who dies has a family who are, thrust into grief and terror at the situation that's emerging in Manchester. We don't know exactly what's happened, but little tiny bits of information are coming out. The police have now conceded it's a possible terror incident, and a separate piece of information has talked about shrapnel wounds, which gets people like me speculating whether or not they're talking here about an explosive device which might have contained nuts and bolts, which are designed, with deadly evil by people who do this sort of thing to kill human beings by, by 1,000 cuts, for want of a better word. They're horrific.
The problem at the moment is because we don't know quite what sort of device is involved. We don't really know what kind of explosion. What we have seen, and a lot of people will have seen on TV, is an image which has been shot from somebody's car, in which in the background, while he's listening to his own radio, you can see an explosion going off.
Well, you see a light first.
Well, you see a light and then you hear the explosion.
And you hear the rumble.
So it's very clear that it is an explosion. And it's at the end of the Ariana Grande concert. Her people have obviously said that she's very shocked, but she seems to be okay. The one thing that we should be concerned about as well, I suppose, is that quite a lot of kids at this concert, apparently.
Absolutely.
The arena holds 21,000. It's the biggest indoor arena in Europe, apparently. And a lot of children have been separated from their parents. And the police in Manchester, Greater Manchester Police, are saying they will be providing a number for anyone concerned about loved ones to contact, which will be released as soon as possible. So as soon as we get that number, we will obviously give it to you. But apparently there are quite a lot of kids, small kids, outside in various places, including the Holiday Inn in Manchester, waiting to be reunited with their parents who have become separated from them.
I mean, this is the most horrible thing about it, is that Ariana Grande apparently attracts youngsters. She's only in her 20s. She's described as a sort of American version of Katy Perry. And, she obviously has a fan base of impressionable youngsters, aged anything from 12 upwards. Now, as you quite rightly say, this arena takes 21,000 people. That's the size of a football stadium, and quite a substantial football stadium. And if that was full of kids tonight, there have been some other theories put forward that as this explosion took place just after Ariana Grande had finished her set, her last song, that there's a possibility of people rushing for the exits could have caused yet more carnage, in people's desperate attempts to get to safety. So we don't know. And what we can say is over the next 3 hours, we'll keep you up to date with everything that emerges, with all the information that's coming out. However, we are dealing with a situation here where 20 or more people have been killed.
Yes, it could well be that is the case. At the moment, speculation about the number of casualties goes on. Police are only saying a number of confirmed casualties at the moment. So, I mean, there are a lot of figures being bandied around. There is no official figure. Also, similarly with the explosions, there have been incidents reported by many eyewitnesses who said that there was more than one explosion. At the moment, again, the police will only confirm that there was one explosion. Certainly that's the one that we've seen. So we're not sure precisely what else there is. But it's clearly a very, very serious incident. It is clearly now going to be some time before whatever is going on in Manchester and around Manchester is going to become clear. But we will bring it to you as and when we can.
Indeed. Ariana Grande Butera is the full name. Ariana Grande Butera. She's only 22.
Yeah.
But she is the top American pop singer of her generation. So, she would have attracted all those sort of people.
Yeah, she's been on The Voice. She's been on all sorts of other shows like that.
Yes, exactly, yeah.
She's very, very popular.
Very popular indeed. Now, at the start of this terrible incident happening, we're all a bit mystified because the usual atmosphere surrounding a terrorist attack includes armed police or anti-terrorist squad members arriving on the scene very, very quickly, pouring out of, SUV vehicles, holding machine guns.
It's entirely possible, though, that may have been the case before the cameras were there and before we knew anything about that.
But we did see live from the scene of the building itself a sort of ring of policemen and women standing around the building, but not looking as though they were in mortal danger from terrorists in the area, if you see what I mean.
No, that's true.
There was an incredible sense of calm. Now, we've seen attacks in Europe when terrorists have been involved, and in this country, of course, when the armed police arrive very, very quickly to track down perpetrators of whatever terrible incident has taken place. That did not appear to have happened at the start, although in the last half hour or so, I would say, sniffer dogs have arrived, identified vehicles which they're now examining.
Yeah.
Armed police are on the scene. A helicopter has arrived overhead. So whether or not this has been upgraded, after initial investigations, and the police now say it's a potential or a possible terrorist incident, I think that must be what's happened. I think facts and what has happened has emerged.
Well, I think because of the fact that there was an explosion, and then what immediately then happened was not another explosion or not sort of the sound of gunfire, as far as we're aware. That the main balance of sort of probability was that they wanted to get people out as quickly as they possibly could, rather than rush in and try and sort of contain everybody. So that seems to be what's happening. There are now reports coming out, not officially once again, but from people who you might regard as reliable sources, saying that we believe the explosion was somewhere in the foyer of the Manchester Arena. So we shall see. Again, lots and lots of different accounts coming in from people saying that there was an awful lot of chaos. There was an awful lot of people being told to run and just to get out.
If I know this building as I do, the foyer is where the main staircases which take you into the arena come down and all meet at the sort of box office, the ticket office. And if people are all heading that way when the explosion happened, there could well have been a sense of we must move faster to get out of here. That often happens.
Interestingly, there's now just been a statement issued by Manchester Arena. This is on their Twitter account. We can confirm there was an incident as people were leaving the Ariana Grande show last night. The incident took place outside the venue in a public space. Our thoughts and prayers go out to the victims. And then they're also asking people to follow at GM Police, with Greater Manchester Police, for all further details. So they're now saying officially, Manchester Arena, the MEN, that the incident at the bomb actually went off outside the arena in a public place.
So that would have been people who'd left that building then, who may have been caught up in the explosion.
Well, as people were leaving, it would seem that the bomb went off. We're calling it a bomb. Nobody's actually called it a bomb. People have referred to an explosion. But it sounds as though whatever the explosion was certainly now not one of these big gas balloons, which was what some people were suggesting, going off inside the venue, which were part of the show, which might have somehow malfunctioned or might have somehow been set on fire by some reason or other.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, so that's quite worrying if it's outside the arena.
It's more worrying because it means almost that people who were streaming away from the building have walked into it. Or
police are now saying 19 people have died.
19,
and that's the figure that they're giving. Latest statement on the incident from the police is this. Further details on the incident at Manchester Arena have now been released. Just before 10:30 p.m. on Monday, the 22nd of May, police were called to reports of an explosion at Manchester Arena. So far, 19 people have been confirmed dead, with around 50 others injured. This is currently being treated as a terrorist incident until police know otherwise. And once again, they're saying please follow the Greater Manchester Police, GM Police, for any other details. So that's a lot of people. 19 people.
It's horrendous. 19 people dead is a major incident. It's happened in a British mainland city, Manchester, one of the most vibrant, I would say, metropolises that we have in this country. I remember the explosion in '96. It was an IRA attack which levelled about 1/3 of the city centre. Now, on that occasion, I think it was a lorry bomb which was parked near Deansgate, and it exploded, but there'd been a warning. Nevertheless, 212 people were injured.
Yeah.
The damage to the city was over £1 billion.
Yeah.
But fortunately, nobody was killed. But you know what the situation is when a bomb like that goes off, it destroys buildings up to a mile away and all that kind of stuff.
And you said there was a warning in those days, right?
Well, I think
a warning of sorts.
I think there must have been a warning. As I recall, it was on the same day of the England-Scotland game, where in the famous Gaza, miracle goal day.
Yeah,
because I was
chair and all that.
Yeah, I was on my way to Wembley when I was called by the office to say they thought there was an explosion about to happen in Manchester because there'd been a warning, and the nature of this is that in those days, these attacks were made to damage property on the British mainland.
But also the general sort of way that the IRA attacked was to give warnings, wasn't it? And
it was
only really in Omar that went horribly and badly wrong because they deliberately sent people to the other side of the town.
Well, the police sent them the wrong way. They sent them towards the bomb instead of away from it. But you're absolutely right. I mean, it was an economic war as much as anything else. And what the IRA are trying to do, we're trying to say, look, we can damage the British economy, you know. You need to listen to our demands and all that. Whereas, of course, the nature of terrorism these days is to kill as many people as possible in the shortest possible time. And funny enough, one of the stories that we're going to cover later on in the show, Mike, is a piece I've seen over the weekend by a businessman who is now full-time producing the sort of stanchions, pillars, road cones, which are solid and which will protect pedestrians from an attack by cars coming off the road onto pavements to mow them down.
Well, because that is the new terror, isn't it?
It is.
I mean, and watching what happened in Times Square, funnily enough, the reason that car finally came to a stop was because it came to a stop on top of 3 of those bollards.
That's right.
Because it literally got sort of hung up on them, if you like.
Some of these bollards now are disguised as lampposts and they go 10 or 12 feet into the ground, so that even if they were hit by a dumper truck, they wouldn't yield. They wouldn't bend.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we'll talk about that. We'll talk about, of course, a lot more too. It's a very sad night. There's a massive incident up in Manchester, outside the Manchester Evening News Arena, the MEN Arena. Police are saying there are 19 people dead. An explosion around about 10:30 last night as people were leaving an Ariana Grande concert. It's a terrible, terrible story. We'll be bringing you more of it as soon as we can. This is TalkSport.
The Two Mikes, simulcast across the UK on Talk Sport and Talk Radio.
This is TalkSport. We are the Two Mikes. Police have confirmed that there are now 19 people dead in this incident at the Manchester Arena. The police statement says that basically there were there was an explosion. They're not calling it a bomb at this point yet, but around about 10:30 last night. Outside the venue is what the Manchester Arena people are saying. So far, around about 50 people have been injured. We were just talking, Mike, about how close to the city of Manchester and the centre of Manchester this MEN Arena is.
Yes.
It backs on to Victoria Station, which I'm told has also been evacuated, and all trains in and out have obviously been suspended and will be suspended, no doubt, for quite some hours.
Yeah, I mean, it's just horrendous. These things suddenly emerge. You know, you look at the numbers and 19 people. I mean, the horrific prospect we're facing is that because there were so many young people at this concert, you know, so many youngsters following this singer, this lady who's only 22,
right?
That for some unknown reason, you know, I don't know, you just don't like to start imagining the nature of the casualties.
No. Exactly right. 50 people injured. I mean, they don't say what types of injuries those are, but people are described as having being running and screaming. I mean, the strange thing about what we now know, which is that the bomb was likely to have been placed outside the venue. What we don't know really is which direction you're supposed to run in, because as you know, having been involved in some of these situations in the past, if there's an explosion and you're then told to run, I mean, a lot of the eyewitnesses so far have been saying we were told to run, but what we don't know is in which direction they were told to run, and precisely, you know, how they knew which way to run. So I wonder whether it could have been a lot worse.
That's right. What I don't like in the statement from the Manchester Arena is the sentence which starts, so far 19 people have been confirmed dead, with around 50 others injured. In my experience of covering these sort of terrible atrocities, that number, the initial number, usually goes up. as the night wears on.
Yes, indeed.
And that would be, another great sadness that we're going to have to anticipate over the next 2 or 3 hours.
Sure. I mean, we're going to be getting an awful lot of tweets coming in from people listening to this show and also listening to other news outlets as well. Eyewitnesses are saying to some radio stations that it was a suicide bomber near the entrance to the foyer, says one Twitter here. Robin says that American media are also talking a possible suicide bombing, going by the nature of when the explosion happened.
Yes.
That would really be a terrible first to have happened at this particular juncture, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it certainly would. And the other thing, I mean, look, we're leaping ahead of ourselves here. First of all, we've got to find out the details of what's happened in this carnage and this terrible atrocity. But then you look at the nature of the attacker, him or herself, and you then start putting it, another piece of the jigsaw into the world pattern of terrorist attacks at the moment.
Yeah.
I've just talked about the guy who runs a business now where he's got local authorities from all over the world buying stuff off him, which are bollards, which can resist lorries and all that kind of stuff. Because that is the new nature of terrorist attack. Not the spectaculars, not tube trains, not trains above the surface, not... car bombs, although this may have been a car bomb, who knows? But the individual, the lone wolf. And if the lone wolf attacker is walking around Manchester with a bomb in his rucksack and has basically put it all together himself from a laptop or a computer or something like that, then we are extremely vulnerable, all of us, to those sort of attacks.
Which I suppose we've always known. I mean, obviously the 7/7 attack was based upon that principle, wasn't it?
Yes, it was,
Four young men wearing rucksacks with bombing devices inside them. They tried to do it again just a few weeks later.
That's right.
But we haven't really had a sort of suicide bomber attack since then, which is many, many years ago in the latest sort of round. A lot of people obviously offering their sympathies, and William, I'll read this out. I know lots of you will be sending tweets in. We're not going to read all of them. Deepest sympathies to the families of those who have lost their lives. Heartbroken for them all. Because also this is a concert which has attracted an awful lot of young people. And I mean, there are going to be a lot of children involved in this as well.
Lots
is going to be absolutely horrendous.
Yes, it's going to be horrendous.
A lot of eyewitnesses again saying all they know is it sounded like a bomb.
There's one here from Noel. I'm sorry to interrupt there. I just came in. Noel says, I was right at the side of the Manchester Arena in my car. I'd just been to pick up the wife from work. The explosion was unreal. Yeah.
Oh, so he heard it.
Yeah, Francis has pointed out Ariana Grande is the American version of Katy Perry. I thought Katy Perry is American too. Francis, thank you very much indeed for pointing that out. Katy Perry is American.
She's a sort of younger version of
she's a sort of younger version of her.
That's what you meant.
Yeah, of course I did. But these artists are very transatlantic, aren't they? But yes, Francis, you're absolutely right. But it's good to get the detail right.
Catherine McFarlane, who was at the show, has said this. We were making our way out, and when we were right by the door, there was a massive explosion, and everyone was screaming. It was a huge explosion. You could feel it in your chest. It was chaotic. Everyone was running and screaming and just trying to get out of the area. So people talk about a loud bang and a flash. I don't think there can be much doubt now that it's a bomb. Really?
No, I don't think of any at all. The video we've seen, I mean, you just raised it about whether or not the explosion happened inside. It didn't happen inside, it happened out.
Yes.
And all we saw...
Well, this is according to the official statement of Manchester Arena.
Yes, that's right. And all we saw was a flash from beyond a building. This was a chap parked up in his car who had a camera on his dashboard. You saw the flash, and then traditionally, when explosions happen, you see the flash first, and then you hear the noise, because of course light travels faster than sound, and the rumble afterwards is very ominous sound indeed, and that's what's happened tonight in Manchester.
Yes, indeed. And obviously the bomb squad are on the scene. They're looking for other devices. Unconfirmed reports that they may have found another device one way or the other, but just a very, very, very difficult situation. I mean, does this change anything? I mean, obviously we're in the midst of an election campaign, and I dare say that that may or may not have been taken into account by whoever has put this bomb in the place where it has appeared. But clearly, I mean, there's not much more that we can do to heighten security in this country, is there?
Well, no, of course there isn't. And particularly if you've got people... I mean, there's so much access to information now on laptops that anybody who's crazed and wants to take out his unhappiness on society itself can pretty much do it from looking at the website. I remember just a couple of years ago being in the hairdressers that I use when a policeman came in and confiscated all the peroxide in the shop because it had become aware somehow in police intelligence that people were looking on websites and finding that you can make bombs out of peroxide, stuff that you put in your hair, you know. So this is going to happen all the time.
Well, you can make bombs out of almost anything.
That's
Timothy
what I'm
McVeigh in Oklahoma City made a bomb out of fertiliser.
Yeah, well, of course they do. They just get bags of fertiliser, put it in, mix it with something else, and bang, you've gone.
Yeah.
And, I mean, you can make a bomb out of a can of petrol, you know, and that kind of stuff. So there's no way of protecting it at all. What we believe in this country is that we have terrific intelligence resources.
Well, it was only just, I think, a few days ago, was it not, that there was a bunch of arrests made in East London.
That's right.
Of some people who were thought to be involved in some kind of terrorism activity.
Absolutely. I mean, you know, successive commissioners of police, not just in London, but in places like Greater Manchester and the northeast of England, the Midlands and all that, do occasionally say that a lot of their officers' time is spent on making sure these sort of things don't happen.
Right.
You know, the intelligence work that the police have to do, which is never recorded and never publicly seen, is one of the reasons why, relatively speaking, we have what we would consider to be a safe country.
Sure.
But as you quite rightly say, if somebody like this is operating in isolation, is operating alone, what do you do? And the answer is it's very difficult to answer that question.
Well, it is very difficult, but what I'm saying is also, in addition to what we know and where we've been, I mean, you and I were both up at Wembley at the weekend.
Exactly.
You know, you go to these places where there is now much more security than there ever was.
Yeah.
It's hard to imagine how you make that any more secure, isn't it?
Well, I don't think you can, because it's interesting this was outside the building. Now, as you quite rightly said, we went to Wembley on Saturday, and we went through all the usual security checks that you go through. And therefore, if it makes it difficult for people of evil intent to get into the buildings, there's nothing to stop them standing outside when the event is over. And as people are pouring out, you know, down a main exit road from the location, that's a prime target for killing people, for injuring people, you know, for doing damage. And trying to succeed in whatever warped and evil mission they're on.
Sure, absolutely awful business. Now, obviously, reports are still coming in. If you happen to be out and about, and if there's anything you want to tell us or that you saw that you didn't see or that you wish to tell anybody else out there, do by all means give us a call, 08717 22 3344. We'll be talking to our man over in the United States very shortly, because Ariana Grande, of course, a massive star over in the United States, and there's an awful lot of coverage over there, and we'll be finding out from our man Sandro Manetti precisely what is being said in the United States. They're taking this as a very, very big story over there as well, because it is being treated as a terrorist incident. It is at Manchester Arena, of course. The explosion is now being called a possible terrorist incident. It's being suggested that it might have been a suicide attack outside of the Manchester Arena front door, or one of the side doors. We shall see, but by all means do get in touch and let us know what you know. 08717 22 3344. Around 50 people said to be injured. Around 19 people now confirmed dead by the Manchester police.
The Two Mics, simulcast across the UK on Talk Sport and Talk Radio.
This is Talk Sport. We are the Two Mics. There is, of course, an incident ongoing up in Manchester. A Manchester concert has suffered an explosion outside the Manchester Arena. There are 19 people confirmed dead by the Manchester police. A second suspect device has now been found by the police. Some eyewitnesses suggesting that a suicide bomb may have been the cause. We don't know that for sure at the moment, but certainly what we do know from Manchester Arena is that the bomb actually did explode outside the venue. So whatever it did, wherever it was taken to, it was not taken in through past security, I suppose. No. It was an Ariana Grande concert, of course. She is one of the biggest stars in the United States of America at the moment. She hails from Florida. She's been on The Voice. She's been on all kinds of US and UK reality TV music shows. Let's talk now to Sandro Manetti, who is, of course, our man in Hollywood. He'll be able to give us an update on what's being said over in the United States. Sandro, very good morning to you. Thank you.
Yeah, horrific human catastrophe, and most channels in America have broken into regular programming to take live coverage of the unfolding terrible drama from Manchester.
What sort of a star, I mean, how big of a star, I suppose, is Ariana Grande? Pretty big here to be playing the MEN, but I mean, she's a massive star in America, right?
Yeah, one of the top 10 biggest pop stars in America. And a lot of the focuses here have been on her young fan base. and how this arena was just full of primarily teenage girls, which make up a fan base here in Britain and all over the world.
Yeah, Sandro, sadly in America they have a history of more lone wolf nutters, for want of a better word, than we've had in this country. And so, therefore, the American people must recognise with this sort of attack, probably more so than we do.
Yes. In Britain, of course, we have grown up with a history of terrorism through the IRA. In America, there is the history of so many mass shootings and lone wolf nutters, as you say. And that's where people's minds go first. When they hear of loud bangs in an arena, they don't think, oh, possible gas leak explosion. They think suicide bomber, terror attack. And in fact, Donald Trump tweeted just a few minutes ago about reports of a suicide bomber with a nail bomb. So right from the White House, that's the word there.
And often the response in America, particularly as this was an American artist on stage tonight in England, in Europe, sometimes the reaction in America is a backlash to people travelling outside of America to perform in this way.
A lot of it's a good point. A lot of the news reports here have talked about refugees flooding through Europe and being recruited by terror cells within perhaps 5 minutes of the incident. That's where the American reports were going about terror incidents and also potential knock-on threats to the United States. But we are in a culture now where that's where the mind goes first, and that's where the news media goes first.
Now, we've got reports here, Mike, as well, that the Royal Oldham Hospital has been put down into lockdown. Now, whether that is because of any particular incident is not clear, but certainly there are news reports. And the problem now, Sandro, as well, with Twitter and the social media sphere, where everybody's a reporter and everybody puts something out on social media before necessarily it's been confirmed. They just say what they've seen or they say what they know. We're being told that some reports coming from Royal Oldham Hospital are that it's in lockdown after a gunman reportedly was threatening patients following the explosion. We don't know if that's true, so we can't say that is true, but certainly Royal Oldham Hospital is in lockdown for some reason or other. So, I mean, as far as the Ariana Grande situation is concerned, Sandro, presumably, I mean, obviously her management team have said that she's okay. She'll be very devastated by this happening at one of her shows.
And the immediate question, which is not answered, is that Ariana Grande has shows scheduled in London on May 25 and 26. Do they go ahead? If they do, how are parents going to feel about their kids going to that show? If they do not go ahead, do the terrorists win? These are some of the questions in this world we find ourselves in, a world of terror. Certainly in America, their vision of Europe now is one big terror zone. They're referring also to the Westminster attacks, events in Paris and Belgium as well. And they're asking, is it safe for American tourists to go over there? Have the terrorists won? Is Europe their playground, and Britain especially? These are the questions being asked by the US media.
That's right.
But of course, the US media will not be long recovered from that incident in Times Square last week, Sandro, which turned out not to really be anything like what it was originally thought to be, which was another sort of lone wolf ISIS sympathiser trying to run over some innocent people.
Exactly. That incident was very much mentioned here, and I remember in the initial reports then, where nobody knew anything, the assumption was, here we are, another coordinated terrorist attack, because the nature of that kind of terrorist attack with a lone motorist driving into traffic is particularly common in Israel and other spots around the world. And so that is naturally why people's minds went there on that incident.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. We're just hearing as well there's been a controlled explosion, or there will be a controlled explosion in Cathedral Gardens, according to the Greater Manchester Police. Yeah. And they're saying to people in the area, if you hear an explosion, do not be concerned. This is a controlled explosion.
Yeah, I think they've just done that, actually.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
So if you have heard that, that's exactly what it was.
Yeah, and that just shows the extent to which the investigation, which seems to have started off a bit slowly in terms of, awareness, is now spreading across Manchester. Yeah.
Sandro,
the authorities cannot take any chances. It's thought that this was one lone suicide bomber, but also they have the possibility, could this be the first in a series of coordinated attacks? So they have to be ready for everything.
Oh, indeed, yeah.
And as far as the whole situation at the moment, I mean, Donald Trump obviously flying around on his first trip abroad, was in Saudi Arabia, he's gone to Israel, he's going to be obviously visiting other parts of the world as well. I mean, is he and his trip abroad into the Middle East thought to be making any kind of inroads into people's attitudes to this kind of thing?
To the war on terror, yes, he scores particularly high in the polls on that, with his tough guy persona really resonating with the American voters. Talking tough in terrifying times has traditionally always worked, and regardless of what you feel about Trump, when it comes to matters of security, he does score well in the polls there.
Right. And as far as this concert tour that you mentioned earlier, she's supposed to be doing some more shows in London. They've not really made any decisions on that yet.
They haven't, and then all over Europe as well. It's early days of this tour, and I guess that's not a question for tonight, but it's something they've got to decide pretty quickly with the shows coming up. I mean, because those May 25th and May 26th shows in London, the eyes of the world will be on them, and she'll be getting advice from police, security, etc. And I'd point out that Manchester Arena is one I know particularly well, having hosted an event there, an evening with Sylvester Stallone, and I know that bags were searched for people going in, for just this fear. The private security and the security there are always looking out for bombs, and at least according to the first reports, this bomb was outside the entrance or the foyer area. Perhaps when people are coming out, somebody goes in. But I know what a great job the security staff do there. You think you're prepared for everything, but then something like this happens, and it's just unimaginable.
Yeah, but this is a terrorist tactic all the time. Go where the crowds are, and they can't get in these arenas anymore. They've been thwarted in the past, and what you've just said about security there, I mean, that's pretty standard now in buildings around the world, isn't it? Certainly in public buildings, certainly a building that's going to contain 21,000 people of a night, and that seems to be very effective. So what we're assuming's happened here, Sandro, is that whoever has perpetrated this terrible atrocity has thought, well, it will be too much trouble to get inside the building. I'll just wait outside the building. Then the people come out, then my victims come to me, and that may well be the way it's been perceived and plotted.
That's certainly how it seems. How you police that, I really don't know.
Well, exactly. I mean, the great problem with terrorists, apart from the obvious problems with terrorists, is that they constantly change their tactics. Every time we discover a new way to thwart them, they change. They start stealing lorries and driving up on pavements and all that kind of stuff, and this will keep going on and on and on. It's a bit like doping and drug testing, really. The dopers always stay ahead of the drug testers, and the terrorists always have to try and find another way to thwart the increase in security, which we all live under compared to 20 or 30 years ago.
And what we do know for a fact, that an attack like this on an arena full of kids out to enjoy a concert by their favourite star is pretty much the definition of cowardice.
Well, cowardice doesn't even come into it. You're talking here about such mindless people. You haven't got a clue what the emotions are that run through the brain of a guy who can go around blowing anybody up, and for him to have any sort of consideration about what sort of victim I want is just a pointless thought, because these guys just don't think like that at all.
It is really awful, isn't it? There's a couple of numbers I want to give out as well, because the Holiday Inn in Manchester has taken in lots and lots of children who are without their parents at the moment. Not to say they're not going to find each other, but if you need to try and contact anybody who is involved in that situation, 0161 836 9600 is the number to contact for shelter. They've got a lot of children there who are waiting to be reunited with their parents, who either have been at the show or perhaps at the show with their parents, or were supposed to meet their parents afterwards, and so far are unable to. Also, we've got a couple of other numbers that we were giving you out. One here from Manchester as well, 07896 711 298 if you need to try and reach reach a loved one. That's another number to try. We'll keep you updated on all of that. Sandro, I mean, it's going to be a long night, obviously, here for us and for all the emergency services up in Manchester. So we may come back to you a little bit later on when we know a little bit more, if we may.
Stay safe, everyone. Thank you.
Yeah,
thank you.
Thanks very much.
Sandro, thank you very much indeed. Sandro Manetti there reporting into us from the United States, where Ariana Grande is, as he said, one of the top 10 pop stars in the world now in terms of her popularity.
Yeah.
And she's got a massive tour that's going to be taking place both in London and also around the rest of Europe. Yeah. We wait to see whether that gets cancelled. We wait to see what the reaction is from her people of the now official figures, which are 19 people have died and more than 50 people have been injured after an explosion outside the Manchester Arena, which could have been caused by a suicide bomber, but we're not entirely sure. We'll be bringing you some eyewitness statements, and we'll be bringing you any more information that we can get as we get it, of course. If you were anywhere near the event, anywhere near the explosion, if you're up there now and you want to be able to share any information with us, by all means do give us a call. 08717 223344. One eyewitness was Isabel Hodgins. She spoke with Sky News about what she saw.
Well, the concert had finished and we were all leaving, and then there was a big bang to our left, and then everybody just ran away from that immediate area. So we didn't know what had happened. But then nobody was really, people were screaming and running, but then it kind of died down. So we didn't know if a balloon had gone off, because balloons had been released in the concert, so we didn't know if it was that. And then everybody was panicking, they was pushing up the stairs, people were obviously running, climbing down and over the chairs. And then as we got out, just everybody was screaming and crying, and then the corridor was full, it smelled of burning. And there was quite a lot of smoke as we were leaving in the corridor, and an area had been blocked off so you couldn't go any further, but we managed to get out quite quickly, and then there was just lots of police and ambulances arriving as we were leaving.
That was, of course, Isabel Hodgkins speaking to Sky News. We'll be hearing from some more eyewitnesses as we go through the night here on TalkSport. We are the two Mikes. There is some terrible, terrible news from Manchester. 19 people have been confirmed dead by the police, around 50 injured after what appears to have been a massive explosion outside Manchester Arena as people were leaving an Ariana Grande concert. This is TalkSport.
The Two Mikes, simulcast across the UK on Talk Sport and Talk Radio.
This is TalkSport. You can tweet us, of course, at the Two Mikes, at Mike Parry, at IROMG. We're bringing you the breaking news, of course, that 19 people have been confirmed dead by the Manchester police after an explosion outside Manchester Arena. People were attending an Ariana Grande concert last night, and it would appear to have been happening just as they were leaving. More than 50 people appear to have been injured as well. Let's hear from Jenny Brewster, who spoke earlier to Sky News.
It was distressing. I took my daughter of 11. This was her first concert. We went. We had a great night. And as Ariana Grande was singing her last song, which was Dangerous Woman, my daughter was tired and she needed the bathroom. And she said, "Can we just go outside now?" And so we did. We went to the bathroom, and then we said, "Let's go now before the rush." So we walked towards where the MEN car park is, where we were parked, and there was a row of stewards stood in a line, stopping us getting through, but they were very friendly, and they said, "This isn't your best way, girls. You're best turning round, and you can get to your car park that way." As I turned round, boom, one loud noise, and then So for the first 10 seconds, we thought about it, and we just walked with haste. And then a gentleman said, "Run!" So we ran, and we walked we walked quickly down the stairs. That's when people were flooding through the concert doors, and the sound was definitely coming from the main foyer, where the guests normally enter through and present their tickets. On exiting the building, we then saw crowds of people and children devastated. We went to the car, which was 10 seconds away. As soon as we got to the car, you could smell the burning. Coming out then was quite a fluid operation. There were people around us. The children were devastated. We could see police running in front of our car, people, emergency services with huge red backpacks on them running into the building. But we did manage to get away, all within about 3 or 4 minutes. But it was devastating.
That's Jenny Brewster speaking to Sky News a little bit earlier on this evening. It sounds absolutely horrendous, and an awful lot of children around as well. As I was saying to you earlier, there has been a couple of numbers given out, basically in terms of missing children. If you've got children that you're looking for, a lot of them are being held at the Holiday Inn in Manchester. We'll give you that number out very, very shortly once again. Let's talk to Chris, though, who's a Liverpool fan, because he's got something to tell us, I believe. Chris, very good morning to you on this terrible morning. Hello, Chris.
Hello, Chris.
Yeah, are you there, Chris?
Hi, mate.
Yeah, hello, Chris. Yeah, Chris, what have you got to tell us, please?
I'm just clearing in Northampton. I'm a delivery driver. I'm clearing in Carby, Northamptonshire.
Yeah.
Heading back up to the northwest. I have room for 2 people in my van.
Right.
I'll be clearing around 3 a.m.
Right. So you're going to arrive in the sort of the vicinity of where this explosion's taken place about 3 a.m. and you're offering 2 people a lift home to wherever they live in the region, yes?
No, the other way round. I'm clearing in Northamptonshire, heading back towards the northwest.
Yes.
If anyone needs to get to Manchester, you can contact me, and I'm happy to drive wherever to collect 2 people. I can only take 2.
Right.
Okay. So in case you've got maybe people who may want to travel to Manchester in case they're worried about someone who's involved.
There,
Sure.
Okay.
Okay.
Sure.
Well, we'll take your number after this, Chris, and that's very kind of you. I'm sure that's very much appreciated. And if anybody wants to take Chris up on his offer, by all means do that. If you need to get up to Manchester and you don't know of any way of doing it, by all means give us a call at 08717 223344,
exactly.
and we'll put you in touch with Chris. The number, by the way, for any children that you might be looking for lost in the Manchester Arena area is to contact Paula Robinson, who's at the Holiday Inn, and her number is 07896 711 298. That's 07896 711 298. We've retweeted that on the Two Mikes Twitter account as well.
That's right. It's very kind of Chris to have rung us with that, what seems like a rather sort of bizarre offer. But I mean, what he's saying is basically is that somebody might have gone to that concert from the place where he is now in the East Midlands, Northamptonshire. And if they're desperate to get over there, get in touch with us. We'll put you in touch with him. You can get over there this evening in about a couple of hours if you're very, very worried about people who've gone to that concert. Now, this approach from Chris is very indicative of what's happening in Manchester at the moment, because we are getting reports in that taxi drivers are giving free journeys to people who need to get away from the area or get to the area to try and find their children or to try and find relatives. And so, you know, the community spirit, you know, the milk of human kindness, as ever in these sort of situations, is rising right to the surface.
Sure.
And, you know, that's one of the few positive things that you can say about an instance like this. It brings out the best in people.
Well, it does. One of the most difficult things, I think, to imagine, unless you've been caught up in something like this, is the kind of chaos that ensues. Because at the end of the day, basically, nobody really knows what's going on. I mean, we got to work this evening around about an hour after the explosion had happened.
That's right,
and there was very, very little information coming out on the news media, very little information that we could get hold of, and very little information that was being given out because it wasn't really known by the cops. So as soon as we do get some good information, we will be able to pass it on to you. But let's talk to Paul, who's called in as well.
Indeed.
And if you are up there and you do need any help, of course, by all means, give us a ring, 08717 22 33 444. Paul, good morning to you.
Hi, good morning.
Yeah,
hello, Paul.
What would you like to say, Paul?
Terrible. Once again in this country, you know, how many more times has this got to happen? I'm a Londoner. I was in London. I was in Whitehall when this last, you know, cowardly act happened, and then once again this evening, another cowardly act.
But the thing is, Paul, you're asking the question how many more times. It's almost as if you're sort of blaming somebody for letting it happen. It's very, very difficult to stop these sort of things happening. This is the challenge that society, a free democratic society, has to face up to and to get on with, and there are no answers.
No, certainly there is answers, and there's certain roads that we must go down. Yeah, my wife is an Asian, and she's a Muslim. we
don't know the nature of this attacker, Paul. You're making assumptions here, mate. Yeah. You're making assumptions. We don't know the nature of the attacker. We don't know the nature of the attack. We don't know what the motives behind it are. You know, we've learnt over the past 12, 15 months, 18 months from around the world that people who are mounting these sort of attacks are doing it for all sorts of bizarre reasons, some of them to do with mental instability. So we can't assume anything about the attack yet.
Well, listen, I completely agree with you, yeah, but probably 90% of these attacks, come from one thing. And, yourself, mate, that's like such a bad thing to say because we know where they're coming from.
No, we don't. We have no idea where this attack's come from.
Of course we do. Because
No, well, if you look at all of the various different attacks that we've had over the course of the last several weeks and months, to be honest, they have come from all manner of different places. You know, some people...
And for random reasons.
For example, the one in New York, we thought there was a terrorist attack. It turned out the guy was from the Bronx. The guy who drove across Westminster Bridge...
had driven up from a seaside resort after having a bad weekend.
But had been a convert to Islam and was not what you might regard as somebody who came from an Islamic country.
A deep-rooted hatred of the West or anything like that.
Came from this country. The guys who blew up 7/7, the tube incident here many years ago, were all from Luton.
That's right.
You know, I mean, it's just very, very difficult to know precisely where this is coming from. If you're going to come on and say that it's all about Islam, you know, yes, it would appear that mostly people who have some sympathy for ISIS at the moment seem to be the ones who are doing all of this damage.
But you can't make any assumption about this attack.
But even that is not strictly true.
No.
And as far as what we know about tonight's attack, we just don't know.
Absolutely nothing. We don't even know if it is a suicide bomber yet. We have no.
We have reports that it may have been,
explosion,
but nobody's saying that officially. The police are not saying that officially, and so we shall find out.
Although, funny enough, in the US, the official line there is that they suspect it was a suicide bomber. So maybe they've got intelligence reports, which we haven't yet been able to access.
Very possibly so. Now, another a company that is offering help up there in Manchester, and if you are a company offering help, by all means, let us know, and we can pass it on. A company called Street Cars, who have put out a note to say that anyone who's stranded in Manchester should give them a call. I haven't actually got a phone number for them, but I'll try and get it for you as soon as I can. But basically, they are offering anyone who is stranded in Manchester a lift home for free. As you were saying, Mike, a lot of people sort of coming together and doing the best they can for all the people. Mark says this, thoughts go out to those families that have lost loved ones tonight and all those children that had to see what mindless people have done. And that is terrible, really. I mean, that's the problem with so many kids at a venue like this.
Shocking.
And several people have said, if it does turn out to be a terrorist attack, it does turn out to be some kind of suicide bombing, that they have targeted families, they've targeted children, which is an unusual situation.
Well, unusual, but we should not be shocked at the horror motives that people like this indulge themselves in. There's a very interesting line here. Liverpool's Metro Mayor, that's Steve Rotherham, his daughters were at the Manchester Arena concert, and he has said, he's issued a statement saying, I feel sick to think that people have lost their lives at a gig attended by so many young people. All my thoughts go out to those parents waiting to hear of the safety of their children. It's a parent's worst nightmare. It is so, so sad. Mr. Rotherham thanked the taxi driver who picked up his two girls from the venue.
Right.
So that in itself...
So his own kids were there.
Yeah. But that in itself is an extraordinarily... well, I was going to say heartwarming human emotion story. You know, Mr. Rotherham, Liverpool's Metro Mayor, his daughters go to that concert tonight. They're safe. They're back safely. But my God, the agonies he must have gone through when he heard that, there'd been an explosion at an area where his children were.
Yes.
And then clearly would have made all the checks on mobile phones and all that to find out they're okay. But parents...
But again, that's not always possible to do.
No, it's not always possible to do because the phone networks go down and people are making so many calls that get blocked and all that kind of stuff. But... you have to say, Mr. Rotherham is a parent who tonight is very relieved. We fear there are going to be parents tonight who are going to be devastated because we don't know yet the nature of the 19 people that so far have been confirmed as dead. We have no idea if they're adults or children or fans at the concert. We just don't know.
And at the moment as well, we're hearing reports and getting reports on Twitter. And I mean, Twitter is in many ways a great thing when this sort of situation occurs, but it's also quite a dangerous thing because a lot of things get said which are not actually confirmed. What we are being told is that people are seeing ambulances coming from as far away as the Lake District to the north of Manchester and as far south as Stoke on the M6 coming up as well. Fergal, thank you for his tweet. He says streetcars in Manchester have offered to give people free lifts home, and their number is this. So please take this down. It's 0161 228 7878. 0161 228 7878. So if you are stuck in Manchester at the moment and you need to get home somehow and you haven't got any means of doing so, streetcars will be able to do that for you. 0161 228 7878. Incredible story, really. That and some people are saying, is it interesting that some American media, US media, are being first on this story throughout the course of the evening?
Yes.
Well, it's not necessarily the case that that's true.
No.
What they're certainly doing is revealing some information which has yet to be confirmed by the authorities in this country. We can't report anything that has not yet been confirmed by the authorities in this country, because I think that would be irresponsible. And there's not really any point in doing it, to be honest. You will only get from us what is being said officially when it is said officially, because otherwise all we will have is a continuation of speculation.
The worst thing you can do in a situation like this is start speculating on what might have happened. Let's stick to what did happen. One thing that is happening is trains will not be stopping or starting from Manchester Victoria Station all day today, Tuesday, OK? Metrolink trams will run through the station but not stop. Obviously, the reason for that is that Manchester Victoria Station, very close to the location of this shocking explosion tonight, and in itself there, the Arndale Centre, which was the scene of the explosion we talked about in 96, is not very far away. I would say about 6 or 7 blocks. So this is a part of Manchester which has suffered before, which is suffering again tonight.
Yes, it is indeed. What we do know, we are going to be here all through the night bringing you this news, of course. What we do know is that there was an explosion. It was outside the Manchester Arena around about the time when people were leaving an Ariana Grande concert at 10:30 last night. 19 people have been confirmed dead. 50 others, including children, have been injured. More coming up.
The Two Mics, simulcast across the UK on Talk Sport and Talk Radio.
This is Talk Sport. We are the Two Mics. We're reporting to you tonight on a very sad event indeed up at Manchester Arena. Ariana Grande was doing a concert. She's one of the biggest pop stars in the world. There were children, there were families, there were women, there were men, there were husbands, fathers, sons, daughters, all sorts of people. 19 of them have now died as a result of an explosion that took place outside one of the entrances to the Manchester Arena. We're not sure whether it was the main entrance at the moment, but we do have some eyewitness accounts, and a couple of people have already talked about what they've seen. One man who was at the scene reported seeing around 30 injured victims, including children and disabled people, lying on the floor as he waited outside to pick up his wife and daughter. This was shortly after the explosion went off. He described his panic as he looked at bodies to try and find his family, and he said that basically there was carnage everywhere. There was a good 20 to 30 of them. Some were young children, some were disabled people. He said he then helped emergency services to treat the wounded, who were scattered by a blast which appeared to happen somewhere near the box office, is what he's saying. So that would suggest perhaps the main entrance, right? He described panic all around. He said he was thrown about 30 feet through a set of doors. He said...
with the force of the explosion?
With the force of the explosion. He couldn't find his family, so he looked back outside, and the police and the fire and ambulance services were all there. He looked at some of the bodies, which looked very, very badly damaged. And it just sounds like an awful scene, absolutely dreadful scene.
It's let's just recap on what we know so far, OK? What we know so far is that 19 people are confirmed dead and 50 have been injured after this blast in Manchester last evening. Well, we're still calling it this evening. It's a few hours ago. The explosion rocked the Manchester Arena at the conclusion of a performance by Ariana Grande. She's thought to have just finished her last song and then left. And I think what we're putting together here, Mike, is a picture of whoever the assailant is here, whoever the assassin is, was waiting for people to come out of that building. So obviously she finished, she's gone off stage, people flown out. We've already seen pictures of people looking confused and distressed as they're rushing from the building. So that apparently is when the explosion took place, OK? The Manchester Arena management are saying the explosion happened outside the venue as people began streaming from the doors, which all fits into this prognosis that we're putting together. Greater Manchester Police said they were called to the venue at around 10:35 and immediately closed the approach roads. They said the blast is currently being treated as a terrorist incident. So that's, that's getting towards confirmation of the motive behind this. Manchester Victoria Station evacuated a few minutes after that, and all trains now cancelled. That's very close by. And a controlled explosion was carried out by police at the Cathedral Gardens area, which is very close to the Manchester Arena, shortly after 1:30 p.m.
Right.
What we're missing at the moment, Mike, in this unfolding story, this horrific atrocity that's taken place in Manchester tonight, is any detail at all about the assailant.
Yeah.
You know, in a lot of these situations, we saw it in Paris, we saw it down in Nice. What you immediately hear is a police network spreading out across the immediate area to A, try and locate those responsible, and B, to find out if there are accomplices who are either still involved in movement around the city or trying to flee from a situation in which they were involved. We don't have any information on that so far. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing, because on a lot of occasions when police have that information, they don't want to make it public to alert those that they're seeking. Yeah. So that could very well be going on, but at the moment we don't know about it.
Certainly we've had reports from Oldham Hospital that was in lockdown. Some reports from inside the hospital where people were saying there's a man with a gun.
Yes.
Now, we don't know if that's true.
We don't know if that's
we can't confirm that, and that has not been confirmed by Greater Manchester Police.
Yeah.
However, Oldham Hospital, I believe, have confirmed that they are on lockdown, but that could be for any number of reasons.
Yeah, it could be for any number of reasons.
What we also don't know is whether the second device, which was involved in a controlled explosion, was found as a result of any kind of tip-off, whether it was found as a result of any kind of arrest being made, whether it just was discovered in some way, shape or form. Again, we just don't know. And again, the reports that you're hearing on some media, which are being reported in the United States, that there was probably a suicide bomber involved.
Yes.
We don't know that either, because what we do know is the explosion went on outside the building, but that doesn't mean it was necessarily a suicide bomber.
No.
Majid Khan is one eyewitness who has given a statement as well. He says, we were all exiting the venue when a huge bomb-like bang went off that hugely panicked everyone, and we were all trying to flee the arena. It was one bang, and essentially everyone from the other side of the arena where the bang was heard from suddenly came running towards us as they were trying to exit Trinity Way, and that was blocked, so everyone was just running to any exit they could find as quickly as possible. He said there was a huge state of panic. People were calling each other as someone had gone to the toilet whilst this had happened, so it was extremely disturbing for everybody there. And so, I mean, you know a little bit more about the local area than I do. I don't know whether you know the difference between the Trinity Way exit and another part of the exit, but it's a very big building. It's the largest indoor arena in Europe.
Well, 21,000 is the size of... Now, you talked about Oldham Arena. I think it's about the same size as Oldham Football Ground in terms of number of people it takes. Obviously, it hasn't got a football pitch in the middle, but in terms of volume of people, that's about it.
Right.
The reason that Oldham Hospital is involved is that this is a part of Manchester which is kind of North Manchester, if you see what I mean.
Right.
Northern Quarter is very close by. That's a huge area, by the way, Northern Quarter, of clubs, nightclubs, bars. There's a big gay community in that part of town. Ancoats is very close by. Now, Ancoats used to be the newspaper area. It's where the Daily Express was located.
Sure.
And
Ancoats Street.
Great Ancoats Street, And the road that ran parallel to that building was called Oldham Road. That's because it went to Oldham, where Oldham Hospital is.
Right.
And the road parallel to that was Rochdale Road, which runs up to Rochdale, obviously. Yes. So it's in that part of Manchester, which is, incredibly populous. The Greater Manchester is very metropolitan in itself, but this particular part of town, for obvious reasons, because the arena's there, is popular with, thousands, tens of thousands of young people and people who are out for a night. So this explosion may well have caught not just those departing from this building, but anybody else who was in the area.
Absolutely.
For all we know.
And people, as one of those eyewitnesses there was just attesting to, people who were coming to pick people up.
Of course,
some of them may be their own children. Because, my young sons would not have been that interested in going to an Ariana concert. However, they might be in the future interested in going to a concert like that. So you send your 12, 13, 14-year-old kids off, you drop them off, give them tickets, they go in to see a show, you come back at 10 o'clock at night to pick them up. There's nothing unusual about that.
No.
That happens all over the country all the time. And imagine how awful it would be for you to be that parent, to go to pick up your kids, and without even knowing what's going on, you can't find them.
It's one of the most innocent pursuits of parenthood, isn't it?
Yeah.
The taxi of mum and dad. So just before they get to the age where they can actually start driving themselves, 17, you're talking about 14-year-olds, 15-year-olds, 16-year-olds. That is one of the main responsibilities of being a parent of a teenager, running them to these sort of events. And the problem is, from the experience that you and I have had in our job for over 30 years, is we are undoubtedly now going to read of the horrific stories of parents who dropped their children off, kissed them goodbye. Yeah. They went to that concert, and sadly, they are not going home if the casualties, and there's 19 confirmed dead so far by Greater Manchester Police, includes the young people who were the majority of the fans at this concert tonight.
Right. Mayor Andy Burnham, only recently elected, says, "My heart goes out to families who have lost loved ones. My admiration to our brave emergency services. A terrible night for our great city." And I think everyone will agree with Andy Burnham there.
You've got to agree with Andy Burnham, because you have to remember, when an explosion takes place, and again, looking at the history of terrorism in this country, how do you know there isn't a second explosion put in place through sheer evil? You know, what these people do is they sometimes use a first explosion to lure people to the area. The area is then booby-trapped for a second explosion, which can cause more casualties. So we have to endorse what Mr Burnham said. Those working for the ambulance, the fire and rescue and the police services who dash towards the scenes of these terrible atrocities deserve our full respect, because they have no idea what they're going to encounter when they get there and what the possible consequences of them moving into that situation where an explosion's already taken place may be.
No, exactly right.
Yeah.
And now I've had a tweet sent to me which is entitled, or it come from the Twitter account of GMP Oldham, which is to say that the GMP,
Greater Manchester Police,
Manchester Police Oldham has got a blue tick. Says police have attended an incident at the hospital in Oldham. The scene has been searched, no offences, and all staff and patients are safe and well.
Yeah.
So it would appear that whatever that incident was
a non-incident.
has now been sort of quelled.
Well, the problem is, of course, tension's very high, and people are on edge when they are anywhere near the vicinity of this sort of thing happening, and so you do and you will interpret sometimes a situation with an extended and inflated sense of importance relevant to the horrors that have gone on just a few miles down the road. That's perfectly understandable.
Absolutely right. Now let's hear some eyewitnesses from the scene, which were recorded a little bit earlier on.
Quick, Corey. Which way? Come on. Corey needs to get round. Corey, get round this way. Come on. Shut up. Stay in the car. Come on. Corey. Come on, lad.
That's some audio recorded by an eyewitness at the scene.
Yes.
Obviously, it's very difficult to work out what's going on, but you can tell that there's a great deal of panic and everything else. Let's have a listen to Amy Scarisbrick, who's from Key 103, a radio station who was at the police base.
Well, the streets of Manchester have completely fallen silent. I'm at the cordon, which is at the back of the arena. It's by the Arndale Centre, if you know Manchester, and there's a Harvey Nichols store, and basically police have set up a base there. There's around about 60, 70 police vans. The sky is just lit up with blue and red at the moment because they've all got the flashing lights on. And around about 5 minutes ago, there was a loud bang in the sky, and I got pushed back by police away from the cordon. I'm not really too sure what was happening at that point. But other than that, it's like a ghost town here at the moment. The streets have been completely evacuated. The cordon is really, really large. It's about a 3-mile cordon. And like I said, very, very silent, eerie scenes here. Just emergency services everywhere.
That was Amy Scarisbrick there from Key 103, a radio station up in Manchester, who was at the police base. We've got lots more information coming in, of course, throughout the night. The news, as we have told you, unfortunately, terrible news from Manchester. 19 people have been confirmed dead by Greater Manchester Police after an explosion outside the arena, Manchester Arena, MEN Arena, following an Ariana Grande concert. She had just about finished. People were just about beginning to leave the venue, and it would appear that outside the venue, an explosion occurred, which has caused those 19 deaths. It's unclear at the moment whether it was a package that was placed there, whether it was a suicide bomber, and indeed they look as though there could be as many as 50 other people injured as well. We'll be bringing you more as and when we get it.
The Two Mikes, simulcast across the UK on Talk Sport and Talk Radio.
This is TalkSport. We are the two Mikes, and we are reporting tonight on a terrible story coming up from Manchester, which is being treated by the police as a terrorist incident. They are saying, what we know now is that 19 people have died. I've got another piece of information, Mike, here from the Greater Manchester Police, which says that the officers carrying out a precautionary controlled explosion in Cathedral Garden confirmed that it was abandoned clothing, not a suspicious item. Yeah. So once again, it proves, despite what many people have been saying to us on Twitter, and some people have been bringing up, saying, well, we all know what's going on. Actually, we don't all know what's going on. Nobody knows what's going on. This was not a second device that was blown up. It was a package of clothing. But
it is vigilance by the security services that lead to these sort of things happening, because you can't ignore it. You have to say to yourself,
absolutely.
This is a highly dangerous place to be in a highly dangerous area. Now, we are looking at some responses here from our audience. Thank you very much indeed. People filling me in on a bit more detail about the geography of Manchester. It's a few years since I lived and worked there, but one very helpful message here from Anthony says the old Press Print Works is 200 metres from Victoria Station. It's now a drinks, social, cinema, meeting place, same distance as College Green. Excuse me, I think he means Cathedral Green there. And what Anthony's pointing out is what I was saying earlier, mate. This is a very popular part of town. It is populous in the sense of, venues like the Manchester Arena, the Northern Quarter, which is incredibly popular. There's a community there built on the side of the canals and all that kind of stuff. And if a terrorist was ever going to try and find himself, a packed part of a packed town, he has gone to, a deadly and obvious, I suppose, location where there are lots of people.
As you said earlier, it's one of the great problems of organising any kind of mass sort of, entertainment nowadays, whether it be a football match, whether it be a rugby match, whether it be a wrestling match or something indoors at the MEN. It's incredibly difficult to ensure that you can keep it as safe as you can inside, but you can't stop what goes on outside. We're going to talk to Tim Vickery, who is, of course, our man in Brazil, because he's a man who knows a little bit about the security problems they had while the World Cup was on, and whether or not there were any threats at the time. Luckily, it all seemed to go off relatively well. Tim, good morning to you.
Good morning. Some sterling work on a very difficult night, gentlemen. Congratulations. Yeah, well, before Brazil, a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, before I came over here, in what seems now a bizarre chapter of my life, I was the manager of a West End theatre, right in the West End, right in the heart of London. And I remember doing a police course then when there was an IRA bombing campaign, and how long ago and how almost innocent in comparison that seems with tonight's events. But I remember being absolutely horrified, being told about just how easy it was, how little space that the terrorists needed in which to place a device. Oh yeah, and it left me very frightened indeed. And technology has moved on considerably in the more than 25 years since then. But you mentioned
so has the cunning and guile of terrorists, Tim. That's a problem. Exactly. I said earlier, it's a bit like dope testing. The people who are going to cheat always stay one step ahead, and the security services in this country are brilliant in their diligence and their intelligence network. But these terrorists, you're going to tell us about the security at the World Cup in Brazil, but the thing is, because they're so well placed, these random, crazy terrorists, these lone wolves, have been pushed out from official competitions to make random attacks like this.
Indeed, and part of the price of a relatively free society,
correct,
is the difficulty of policing against this kind of incident. And in terms of the Brazil cycle of mega events, we had the World Cup in 2014 and the Olympic Games here in Rio, obviously last year. At these moments, when we're hearing about this, and this is a big story, this is playing very big in Brazil tonight. It's only just gone, it's about 20 past 10 at the moment. So there's a big political story with the president in trouble, but this is running it a close second. And at these times, Brazil seems a long, long way from the world. The world seems to be happening somewhere else, because thankfully, this kind of terrorist problem is really not known in Brazil. But obviously, there was a danger during the World Cup and the Olympics of the world coming to Brazil, and suddenly Brazil finding itself caught up in these kind of issues that give rise to terrorism. So the local police, they had to get into international specialists for training. The other social order problem that they had to deal with was the very different social order problem of the mass disturbance, which proved extremely difficult to police during the Confederations Cup a year before the World Cup. The kind of thing had almost run its course by the time the World Cup happened.
But you're talking about mass protests on the streets, aren't you? You know, banner-waving people taking up the whole of a centre of a city or something.
Yeah, which can be terrifying. I was caught up in one of those kind of incidents about a month ago, protests about proposed changes to the pension law and to labour legislation. And honestly, I felt that I was in hell for a while there. You could almost smell the sulphur while the place was absolutely getting kicked to pieces. And the police were lobbing tear gas all over the place. It was a horrible, horrible environment. But even that, I think, is easier to police than the silent, difficult to detect threat of the lone terrorist, especially the lone terrorist who's prepared to lay down his own life.
Yeah, exactly.
Interesting, isn't it, Tim, as well, that, as you say, Brazil is not short of a sort of a downtrodden underclass of people who might feel that the world has not treated them well and who might even feel angry at the ruling class of Brazil. But bombings is not something that other countries in South America have suffered from what you might call sort of little sporadic acts of terrorism. But as you say, bombings and terrorism has never really been part of Brazil's history, has it?
It hasn't. I am worried at the moment because the political polarisation, which is relatively new to Brazil, it's dividing families. It's ending friendships. You wonder where this is going to go. You can see so much anger, and it seems to me, gentlemen, that this almost uncontrolled anger is a horrible symptom of the modern world, and perhaps in the wrong hands with the wrong influence, it doesn't take much to channel such anger into potential terrorism. And there were arrests made a few months before the Olympics, with a terrorist cell had been identified, and they'd converted to Islam. I don't think they actually knew very much about the religion, to be honest. It was disaffected youth looking for a cause. But their plans were very, very rudimentary, involved kind of just getting off a bus and spraying the place with bullets. Right. But if that's not detected by the intelligence services beforehand, and in this case it was just internet conversations that were very, very easy to trace. But if that's a little bit more sophisticated, it is very difficult to stop the kind of lone nut or the group of highly motivated, perhaps unbalanced individuals, especially if they're prepared to lay down their own lives.
Well, you see, this has always been the problem in modern-day terrorism, Tim, and it's a mantra which the intelligence services use all the time. We in the West want to live. Those who would attack us want to die. And when you're up against an enemy that has that motive behind them, they will do the most appalling things in pursuit of the crazy reasoning that they have in their head for doing these things, for committing these atrocities. And you're absolutely right. When somebody's determined to do that and couldn't care less what the outcome is in relation to their own life, even to their own body, blown it to bits or something like that, it's an almost impossible situation in which you can form a policy to stop it happening. It's so random, you can't.
Well, that's right. And you wonder about this link as well that some of these disaffected youth around the world make with whether it be ISIS or whether it be something they've seen on YouTube and whether the Muslim religion and the whole business of Islam. If it's spread to a place like Brazil, where there is no religious need for Islam, really. There's been no call for it. There's been no thirst for it. If people are adopting Islam as a result of wanting to blow people up or shoot them, what on earth happens next?
I'm remembering now being in London during 2005. I wasn't there for the bombings of July the 7th, but I was just afterwards. And I was there the day that the Brazilian Jean-Charles Jimenez was killed at Stockwell tube station.
Yeah, that's right. The police officer in charge of that operation, Cressida Dick, is now the Metropolitan Police Commissioner.
Which is worrying, isn't it? Because there were so many blunders made on that operation, and then so many smears about about Jean-Charles afterwards. I could understand, in the climate of the times, I can understand why mistakes were made in that operation. What I found harder to forgive were the lies that were told afterwards, maybe to protect careers. I tend to view that had they held that, because they knew very early afterwards that they got it wrong.
Yes.
Had they held their hands up, I think the vast majority would have understood that in that situation, when you're dealing with people who are prepared to lay down their lives, you make a mistake and it's fate.
Yeah.
What was poor, I think, was the attempt to smear the fellow who was so tragically killed afterwards.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone gained anything from that, apart from a few people in the police.
No, you're right. And Tim, I'm sorry, I'm not having a go at you, but when you use the expression "lay down their lives," that's a noble expression. That's about somebody who fought in the Second World War, in a Spitfire pilot sense. These guys don't lay down their lives in the sense of, it's an honourable thing to do. They're just crazy. And that's what you're doing. You are dealing with madmen, and they're laying down their lives. Bit is not. It's they see themselves walking through the gates of whatever paradise they want to go to by doing these things, which is in my mind a totally different interpretation of laying down your life.
Yes, I can't disagree with you, but in order to deal with this threat. We must get inside the heads of those who are prepared to do it.
Of course.
And inside their head, they are laying down their lives for a noble cause.
I take your point from their perspective, yes.
It may
certainly.
well be as well that if it does turn out that an awful lot of innocent children have suffered in this particular incident, in the way that, of course, many innocent people have suffered over the years at the hands of these maniacs, right? If it does turn out that there are children involved in this, it may well be some kind of a watershed moment as well, because I'm already seeing an awful lot of reaction on social media, which is very different from what's come before. But if you know there are kids involved, and you know that this concert has been particularly targeted because there were going to be children there, and that changes the game, I think.
But how will it change the way you stop it happening? That's the biggest problem.
Well, it may just harden people's resolve.
Well, you can harden your resolves, and I agree with that, Mike. But as Tim and I and you have just discussed, how do you stop somebody who's wandering around with a bomb in a rucksack on their back, who is just determined to cause carnage and chaos? And by the way, and I think you'd agree with this, Tim, the more carnage and chaos sometimes these people cause, the more they like it. So
exactly, that's the objective.
Yeah,
but it does seem it's such an unbelievably stupid target for them to have picked. And if it was a military target, for example, then we could understand to a greater extent, without condoning, obviously. But a show of Ariana Grande, it doesn't make any sense at all, and you can only hope that Mickey G's point has some validity here, and as a result of attacking a target where a singer who is aimed at a young market, there's no military justification for this whatsoever. You can only hope that there is some kind of backlash, some kind of positive backlash from this incident.
The backlash will be anger and fury from people here, as of course it should be. But the actual attacker sees the opportunity for a soft target. That's all they're looking for. They're not looking for a reason. They're not looking for world approval. They're not saying that, well, at least there's some honour in attacking the military. They just want a soft target. And what could be softer than wide-eyed, enthusiastic children coming out of a concert from their favourite pop star and having had a great night? There is no softer target in the world, is there?
No.
Well, if others who share the cause of any terrorists involved here are also appalled by the target, then at least that's something, I suppose.
Well, it is, but
it's hard to find consolation.
But it may be. But do those people exist? I don't know.
Very difficult indeed. Tim, listen, thank you very much indeed for your wisdom as ever, and for telling us what went on during the World Cup and the Olympics, of course, in Brazil, which could all have been a massive security nightmare, as many things have been. One of the things we do know, Mike, as well, is that Manchester as a city is responding in a remarkable way.
Of course.
In the sense where we'll give out these numbers again. We've already heard that at Holiday Inn there are some children, I think some 43 children as yet, reunited with their parents. If you are a parent looking for somebody...
What do you think's happened there?
I think there's just an awful lot of confusion.
Are these children who weren't at the concert with their parents?
No, I think they would have been at the concert and have found their
to be
way...
picked up afterwards.
Yeah, either going to be picked up afterwards or have somehow lost their parents in the mad rush to get out of the building.
Yeah.
And that may have been the case too.
Quite rightly, no parents coming in from 6 or 7 miles away to pick up their children will be allowed within a mile of the arena now. So obviously, you've got to get those children and put them somewhere.
Absolutely. And at the moment, the Holiday Inn Express in Manchester, near the arena, is the place where they're being held. There's also a place called Sunlight House, which is in Manchester, M33JZ in 13 Key Street. Yeah. They're taking people in who might require shelter tonight. It's about a kilometre from the MEN. I'm sharing that right now on Twitter, but if you need to get in hold of the Sunlight House, it's a Grade 2 listed building on Key Street in Manchester, and they are taking people in as well. We'll be keeping you updated as best we can. What we do know so far, the only facts we know so far, there have been supposedly 19 people have been killed and 50 people or so have been injured. The police in Manchester are treating this as a terrorist incident. This is TalkSport.
The Two Mics, simulcast across the UK on TalkSport and Talk Radio.
This is TalkSport. We are the Two Mics. We are continuing to update you as best we can on all the news that's coming out of Manchester. We're hopeful that there may be some kind of police statement coming out soon, which will maybe give shed more light on what has actually happened and the situation that is ongoing. But I'd just like to give you this number out again. We mentioned the Holiday Inn in Manchester, where children who are without parents currently and are needing to be reunited with them are being kept. And I'm told there is some 43 to 45 kids there right now. The number is this: 0161 836 9600. So if you've been separated from your children as a result of what's happened tonight at the Manchester Arena, please ring that number, 0161 836 9600. A lot of people earlier as well, Mike, were saying we haven't heard much from Theresa May.
No.
But obviously, as the Prime Minister, she would have needed to wait until they knew precisely what they were dealing with. She has put out a statement now. Prime Minister Theresa May says her thoughts are with the victims and families of those affected in what is being treated by the police as an appalling terrorist attack. Those are her words.
Those are her words, yeah. Now, Mrs May is the Prime Minister. She's incumbent. Now, in 1979, I covered a story in which Mrs Thatcher was on the campaign trail. Yeah. She wasn't the incumbent Prime Minister. She was challenging Jim Callaghan. Yeah. And she'd been leader of the Tory party for 3 years. And she was, I'm not sure where she was around the country, and I haven't had time to check this out, so this is all from my memory of the story at the time. But it was 1979, and a man called Ari Neve, who was one of her top aides, was back in London, in the Houses of Parliament. And he came out of the chamber of the House of Parliament. He went down into the basement, got into his car, because the MPs were allowed to park their cars in an underground car park. And he drove his car around the basement and then came to the spiralling road that would take him up to ground level to get out into London.
Which was a sort of an elevated, almost a slip road, wasn't it?
An elevated slip road. And what happened was, as his car got onto the elevated slip road, the IRA had planted a bomb under his car, and it was a mercury bomb. And what happens is that when the car then starts going upwards, apparently a metal ball bearing in this bomb rolls from the front to the back and detonates the bomb, and it blew up Ari Neve.
And they knew exactly where it would happen, because that, as you say, as you've just described it, that sort of movement would make it go off.
It would make it go off. So the smoke was coming up from the underground car park through the access road, and this happened right in the centre of London. It was one of the first terrorist attacks in the centre of London, and it was at a time when there weren't even policemen on the gates at Westminster.
Well, it was as a result of that explosion. I think that they completely revamped security at the House of Parliament.
Oh, they did, and put concrete blocks in the way and all that kind of stuff. But the point is, Mrs Thatcher was out on the campaign trail, and to this day I remember the picture. It's a bit like you remember when George Bush was told about the attack on the Twin Towers? Yeah. Remember he was in a school,
a primary school, in fact.
That's right. And his assistant leaned over and whispered in his ear, and you saw the flicker of horror go across his eyes. Well, I remember seeing Mrs Thatcher. She was standing near the hustings, and somebody came over and got very close and whispered in her ear, and her face just crumpled into this ghastliness because Airey Neave was her closest aide and ally. Airey Neave, ironically, was a war hero.
Yeah.
He had a fantastic and distinguished record in the Second World War. You know, a man who very, very bravely had fought against Nazi Germany and then gone into politics. And he was also a huge support to Mrs. Thatcher. Anyway, obviously, they had to get over that.
So, just as a personal friend, I mean, even if there was nothing else going on, and you're told one of your best friends has been blown up by a bomb,
that's right.
It's a pretty shocking event.
But a guy who was also organising your campaign to try and make you Prime Minister, I mean, it's a huge blow. Now, there is some talk, I think, already in Westminster circles tonight, because, of course, Mrs. May is the incumbent Prime Minister. There may be a day's halt at least to electioneering today, Tuesday, and maybe.
I think if nothing else,
Wednesday.
Certainly in the Manchester area, you would have to assume there'll be nothing going on there.
You'd have to. But anyway, Mrs. Thatcher went on to become Prime Minister. She her term in number 10 Downing Street is legendary.
Yeah.
But without a shadow of a doubt, it shaped her attitude to the IRA during her years as PM. And many years later, when I was working on the Daily Express and I was dispatched over to Ireland for about 6 months, I remember being in our office, the Daily Express Bureau in Belfast, in Great Victoria Street.
Yeah.
And all the traffic had gone. It just disappeared. I was looking out the window. I think, what's going on here?
Yeah.
And then from the distance, across the bridge, across the river, I saw a convoy of blue lights. And then slowly got closer and closer. And then I saw the car come off the bridge and turn right. And Mrs. Thatcher was sitting in the back of a Jaguar, which is in the middle of the convoy. And she'd come to Northern Ireland. But they never announced the Prime Minister's arrival in those days for obvious reasons.
In the same way that much later they never told anyone when someone was going out to Afghanistan.
No, exactly.
Going out to visit the troops, whether it was Cameron,
absolutely.
whether it was Obama, whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. But it absolutely shaped her attitude to the IRA, and as a consequence of her, I don't know how you put it, of her determination, the hunger strike started because the IRA prisoners wanted concessions. A lot of it was to do with what they wore in jail, believe it or not. It was, what sort of uniform they wore. They wanted to be treated as political prisoners. She said no, as a result of which Bobby Sands became the first hunger striker who died, and I think Francis Hughes was the second, but I'll be corrected on that. And that position, Mrs. Thatcher's position, was shaped by a terrorism act that she'd been touched by much earlier in her career. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so you think now, Mrs. May tonight, she is the Prime Minister. She is the leader of this country. She's got to respond. She's got to show that, this will not break the will and the spirit of the British people. And how are we going to fight back against this evil in our society? And that's a huge responsibility. She hasn't been Prime Minister for very long. And she's going into an election to ask the British people to endorse her. So she's going to have to be impressive in the way that she responds to this, because that's what leaders have to do.
Absolutely right. A couple more announcements just to bring you as we go on through the night. We will bring you the information that we can bring you. Obviously, many people are saying, why can't you say this? Why can't you say that? We can only tell you what we know. We can only tell you what has been confirmed.
Exactly.
And what has been confirmed is that 19 people have so far been killed. There are many being treated for injuries, 50 plus, we believe, after an explosion outside Manchester Arena, which appears to have taken place somewhere near the box office. If you were out in that part of the Manchester Arena, waiting outside for somebody, and if you have still got to try and meet up with those people, by all means keep listening to us. We'll try and give you as many bits of information. One from Mayor Andy Burnham once again, and this is on Twitter. There are two hashtags you should be following. One is Missing in Manchester, and the other one is Room for Manchester. And he says, demonstrating the true spirit of our city in the face of such devastating tragedy. And the Greater Manchester Police also saying the emergency services are still working at the scene of the incident at Manchester Arena and continue to ask the public please to avoid the area. So please don't go down into that part of the city if you can possibly avoid it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, we're hopeful that there might be a police statement, as I said, coming out at some point in the next hour or so. But we'll bring that again. We'll bring that to you as soon as we know.
Absolutely. I mean, as you would expect, individuals and organisations and even official bodies in Manchester are saying we remain strong. We will not be cowed and all this kind of stuff. And that's a typical reaction to a horror like this taking place in your own community, OK? The problem is, when these things happen at night, excuse me, when dawn comes tomorrow morning, there's going to be a terrific realisation, an horrific realisation from many, many people about the scale of this tragedy. Because it's all very well to say, well, there are 19 dead at the moment. You know, sometimes in numbers of tragedies, like the Twin Towers and all that, the numbers have been much greater. But it means 19 families now are getting a knock on the door from somebody who's sadly telling them that they've lost a loved one. And the consequences of this will reverberate for decades.
It will. I'm looking at an awful lot of pictures now which are beginning to emerge on various newspaper websites of people leaving the arena after the event. And there's an awful lot of very, very young-looking people, a lot of teenagers, a lot of people very badly injured, a lot of people with sort of what you might call walking wounded type injuries as well. We'll bring you more on that and on all of the news from Manchester Arena coming up very shortly.
The Two Mikes, simulcast across the UK on Talk Sport and Talk Radio.
This is Talk Radio and Talk Sport. We are the Two Mikes, but simulcasting on both broadcasting bases, I should tell you. Theresa May has come out and called this what appears to be an appalling terrorist attack. And I suppose if she's now saying that, that means pretty much it's not any longer just being treated as a terrorist attack. It is being accepted as a terrorist attack.
Exactly, yeah.
But what we don't know, we're looking now at some diagrams and some footage that's coming in of where exactly the attack actually took place, and what looks like the explosion area in the foyer of the Manchester Arena, which is right by the box office area and right by Victoria Railway Station, has resulted, of course, in lots of people running the opposite way. We were mentioning earlier the Trinity Way exit, which seems to be at this sort of the far end at the back, more like the stage end of where everything was going on. So this very much took place at the front end of the Manchester Arena, which is the furthest part from the stage. So I suppose the furthest part away from where Ariana would have been.
Yes, that's right.
Having finished her show.
That's right.
And what we have been told, as you mentioned earlier, Mike, is Victoria Railway Station is going to be closed for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, exactly.
Certainly no trains in or out of it this morning at all.
No, that's
and it's
right.
all been evacuated.
When they say the explosion took place, it was a bit unclear earlier as to whether the explosion took place inside or outside. But the foyer area, as you pointed out, could have like a dozen doors. It can also have like open alleyways, if you see what I mean. You know, where people queue up and to get in and to buy tickets and all that kind of stuff. So that is all called the foyer area.
Well, in fact, from what we're looking at here, the box office itself is sort of outside of the actual arena itself, and then there's a sort of a pedestrian area between the box office and the foyer area.
That's right.
It looks like the bomb's gone off somewhere there.
Exactly.
Certainly, Manchester Arena's official statement was that the bomb went off outside.
Yes.
Or the explosion went on outside. Outside the actual place.
I'm just looking at the first edition of the Manchester Evening News. Okay, terror at the arena. And then they list the facts we've already told you. At least 19 killed in blast horror. Teenagers flee in panic. Police treat explosion as terrorism. But they've got a picture of a young girl there who is being assisted away from the area. And she's... it's not clear whether she's got tattoos on her hands and arms or blood. A lot of it looks like blood. But the other thing, which is always very apparent in explosions, is that some of her clothes have sort of melted off her. I think she's been wearing tights, but they don't look like tights anymore. They're sort of hanging. Yeah. And that, of course, is as a result of heat from an explosion. Because when an explosion happens, without trying to teach my mother how to suck eggs, a huge cloud of heat is, pushed out very, very quickly indeed, and it can burn people like 100 yards away. Yeah. The searing intensity of that comes from the core of the explosion pushes out so quickly in ripples that it could, it can cause severe damage to people who aren't even in the vicinity.
Well, I certainly have to say that some of the reports that I'm now reading, which I'm not going to read out to you because some of them are pretty graphic.
That's right.
From eyewitnesses who were saying some of the stuff that was flying through the air, there were body parts everywhere. I mean, it's beginning to sound like a much, much more serious and horrific scene than we were led to believe that it was, I suppose, only about 2.5 hours ago. Yeah. Because it may well be that this is now the way that these events will unfold, whereby there is a sort of a limit to what is released by the authorities until they know precisely what they're dealing with.
Yes, that's right.
Because we were both quite surprised earlier on, just as the show was beginning, at around about 1 o'clock this morning, how little information was being made available.
That's right.
And how little kind of almost eyewitness information was coming out. Because it's very clear that this is going to go down as possibly one of the worst terrorist attacks that this country has ever seen.
On mainland Britain, without a shadow of a doubt.
Yeah.
When we came to air at 1 o'clock, we weren't even sure it was a terrorist attack.
No.
We were still outside trying to pull all the facts together, debating whether it was one of these huge balloons.
Yeah.
Apparently, these gas balloons bounce around inside these arenas, right? And people just sort of poke them back into the air, don't they? And there was some speculation that one of those had touched a flame or something like that,
right.
and then sort of blown up. But obviously, that was just a speculative theory at the time. And as you quite rightly say now, unfortunately, the grimness of what seems to have happened in Manchester tonight is now becoming more and more apparent.
Yeah.
And it gives you a really, really sick feeling in the stomach when you think of the human suffering which has clearly taken place in one of our major cities.
Sure.
What would you call Manchester? Our third city, London, Birmingham, Manchester, Leeds might argue about that.
Yeah.
Manchester, capital of the north, some would say. And a shockingly horrendous incident that's taken place there is only now actually exposing itself for the sheer horror that it is.
And of course, Manchester would have been very much at the centre of all of our thoughts on this show this morning, generally speaking, because Manchester United taking part in the Europa League final.
Yes,
of course, tomorrow night, Wednesday night against Ajax. And, I wonder whether that's going to be affected in some way because of the fact that, one of the teams is now coming from Manchester.
Sure. An hour before this show started, we thought that the biggest story coming out of Manchester tonight was the fact that Wayne Rooney appears to be on the brink of being dropped from the England squad by Gareth Southgate.
Yeah.
An hour after we started the show tonight, Wayne Rooney doesn't matter. And I don't wish to be rude to Wayne Rooney, but you know exactly what I mean.
Well, sadly, in these circumstances, nothing really else matters.
No,
apart
it doesn't.
from the families who are suffering, the families who are about to suffer, and whatever else we can learn over the course of the next few hours. We will be with you through the night. Once again, Paula Robinson is the name we've been given. If you need to try and track down any lost children from the Manchester Arena show, because it was an Ariana show that was going on. She is one of the biggest pop stars in the world. I mean, probably not one that you and I would perhaps know an awful lot about. Ariana Grande. But when we spoke earlier to our correspondent over in Hollywood, Sandra Minetti, he said that she is by far and away, in the top 10 of popularity. Any children that have not yet found their parents, not yet been reunited, are being held, or at least many of them are, about 45 of them are being held at Manchester Holiday Inn. Paula Robinson is the contact. The number to call is 07896 711 298. That's 07896 711 298 if you've got any worries about where any children might be.
That's right. Have we put out a message saying that the Sunlight House building is taking those that require shelter tonight?
We have, but no harm in doing it again.
It's around a kilometre from the MEN Centre. Please, contact them if you're in need. It's at 13 Key Street, Manchester. And they say that they are very happy to try and help out, OK?
Right.
And again, people helping as much as they can. It's a sad thing to say, Mike, but in this country, you've just touched on it. I was just going to expand on it. We have become used to terrorist attacks, and we have become used to how to respond to them. Excuse me. Do you remember at the Daily Express, we lost a very good colleague from the William Hickey Diary, who was blown up in the attack on Harrods.
Yes.
And do you know what? I can't even remember the lad's name now because he'd come from Oxford University and he was a real dandy. He dressed flamboyantly. He was perfect to work on the William Hickey column because it meant socialising at posh parties and, grabbing stories from the hoi polloi and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
And he was actually passing the back door of Harrods. And this was, I think, in 1984, was it?
It was around about the early 80s, 83, I think it was.
83?
I'll tell you why I know that is because it was the year before I went to America, because my mother very nearly was caught up in it, because every Saturday she went to Harrods to do her bit of shopping.
Yes.
And because I was actually, bizarrely, a bit late, because I was staying with them at the time, because I was a bit late waking up, she didn't go as early as she would have normally gone.
Golly.
And she went an hour later, and she got to within just about walking distance, having parked the car around the back of Hyde Park, got to just about, I would say, 500 yards from Harrods when it went off.
She heard the explosion.
And she normally would have been there.
Yeah, I mean, terrible. But our friend from the Express, and it was such a sad story because he was the only son of Polish immigrants who were tailors who'd set up, I think it was in Barrow-in-Furness. And, they put the boy through school as best as they could, and he did terribly well and got to Oxford University. He had a hugely glittering career in front of him. He would have been fantastic because he really was a a young, confident man. And I was in America when I heard that he'd been killed, and it was truly shocking. And that at least, unfortunately, steels you for, what comes next, so to speak. It's a horrible situation. But we've had to suffer these for years in this country.
Well, I mean, in our lifetimes in particular, pretty much since I've been a teenager, when the IRA bombs were going off all over London, terrorism has been a part of our lives.
It has been a part of our lives. I mean, when you talk about terrorist attacks, I remember
Philip Geddes, by any chance?
No, Philip Geddes, yes, it was. Yes, it was.
Geddes.
Young Philip Geddes, yeah, that's right. It was Philip Geddes, yeah. You're absolutely right. And, there are terrorist attacks on soldiers and the military and all that. And you quite rightly say, you think, is that just a consequence of war, even if the war isn't defined? And then there are attacks on civilians, which, of course, appalls us all in a much, much different way.
Absolutely. And this does look like an appalling, which is what Theresa May is calling it, an appalling attack, an appalling act, dreadful situation. So far, 19 people confirmed dead, around 50 injured. This is TalkSport.
The Two Mikes, simulcast across the UK on TalkSport and Talk Radio.
Lots more news coming in. Of course, some of the front pages have been updated because, of course, the original first editions, which we'd have seen last night before the show started, didn't know about the incident. They've now been updated, and so more than likely in most parts of the country, when you buy a paper in the morning, they will have different headlines. And what we've got here, Daily Mirror's got 19 dead in pop concert, suicide bomb. Now, they seem quite confident with that headline, but they've put it in inverted commas, which suggests that they're not perhaps as confident as they might be.
Well, there's no confirmation of that yet, and yet all the facts that we know so far are pointing towards that's what it must be. I mean, I'm asking myself in my head, I'm not presuming anything, but what else could it be?
Well, it could have been a package, perhaps.
Yes, but
outside, no?
But it's definitely an explosion, and even if it was a package, somebody's got to put it there, if you see what I mean.
Oh, yeah, but there's a big difference, I think, is there not, even just in your own mind, and in terms of the kind of horrors that we've seen over the years, somebody actually detonating themselves.
Yeah, that's right.
Because that seems always a lot more callous and disgraceful and horrible.
I mean,
than somebody leaving a bag,
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Somebody might have put it in a litter bin. For years and years and years after the IRA attacked stations in this country, litter bins were sort of banned from public places.
Now you go on the tube in London, and there are bins on the platforms. I remember, having no place to put any litter for years and years and years.
But they are see-through bins these days because, for some unknown reason, the security forces seem to think that, well, if somebody puts a bin if somebody puts a device in a bin which is actually a plastic bag, we'll be able to see it. But you wouldn't, because it wouldn't have bomb written on the outside of it. It would be disguised in something like a fast food package or something like that.
Sure.
So look, it's one of those no-win situations. You've got to have bins around to put litter in.
Yeah.
We all know the extent of the litter problem in this country. But then again, if those facilities are then used to assist terrorism, you've got to get rid of them again.
Indeed.
Yeah.
The Guardian's front page says, murder in Manchester, at least 19 die in arena attack. And speaking of Ariana Grande and her future concerts, the O2 have just tweeted out saying that she is due to perform at the O2 on Thursday and Friday. That's in London, of course, at the O2.
Yeah.
They say, we will advise as soon as we can as to the status of these shows.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it's hard to imagine that her shows are going to go ahead after what's just happened.
It's very hard indeed, and yet sometimes this brings out the best in people's fortitude and their desire to say, look, life must go on.
Yeah.
That can happen. But there's two aspects of this. One, would anybody feel confident about doing that with such an appalling, I'm sorry, I should have used the word appalling, tragedy, 36 hours behind them. More to the point, probably, how many people will want to attend these sort of concerts in a huge public area, fresh from reading and seeing on television and being told by word of mouth about what's happened in this appalling and shocking incident in Manchester.
Well, and indeed, in the aftermath of the Bataclan terrorist attack in Paris, most of the big bands that were supposed to be playing in Paris, even that sort of month, just cancelled. Right. And I think U2 was among them, and Madonna was among them. And there's no question of people saying, they're scared to do a show. No. It's just not really a very good atmosphere
in which to do one.
It's common sense, and it's also, it's all very well to say we must be defiant against the terrorists, but, it's not a time of celebration. It's a time of mourning and a time of great sorrow. And I think that's what we're seeing really really, right now at the moment. We've got lots to do coming up in the next hour. We'll bring you all the latest news from this terrible terrorist attack in Manchester. This is Talk Sport and Talk Radio.
The Two Mikes, simulcast across the UK on Talk Sport and Talk Radio.
This is Talk Sport. We are the Two Mikes. We're broadcasting live on Talk Sport and Talk Radio. We're going to go live now to Ian Hopkins, Chief Constable, Greater Manchester Police.
Hospitals across Greater Manchester. My thoughts are very much with those that have been injured and lost their lives and their loved ones at this terrible time. We are doing all that we can to support them. Officers from Greater Manchester Police and Emergency Services are working at the scene and are supporting those affected. We are coordinating the operation here at Greater Manchester Police Headquarters. An emergency number is available for all those concerned about their loved ones or anyone who may have been in the area. The number is 0161 856 9400. We are currently treating this as a terrorist incident until we have further information. We are working closely with National Counter-Terrorism Policing Network and UK intelligence partners. This is clearly a very concerning time for everyone. We're doing all that we can, working with local and national agencies to support those affected as we gather information about what happened last night. As you will understand, we are still receiving information and updates, so we'll provide further detail when we have a clearer picture. I want to thank people for their support and would ask them to remain vigilant, and if they have any concerns at all, to report them to the National Anti-Terrorist Hotline. The number is 0800 789 321. It is important also that people here in Manchester avoid the area around Manchester Arena so that emergency services can continue to effectively deal with the incident at that location. Thank you very much.
Have there been any arrests, Chief Constable?
That was Chief Constable of Manchester Police, Ian Hopkins, giving what was, I suppose, the only kind of statement initially that you can give, which is obviously to confirm what we know so far, but not really to take any questions on it.
Well, he was asked by a reporter at the end, have you, and then it just trailed away because he walked away. And actually, whilst in our profession we want people to give us more and more information, I think he's quite right not to have got into speculation. He gave all the facts as he knows them at the moment. Huge responsibility now on that man to get to the bottom of this and find the perpetrator and investigate whether the perpetrator of this crime works with other people. Is the threat to his city still apparent? Is it going to be a lockdown for Manchester City Centre tomorrow morning because he believes that there are other people intending to harm the people of Manchester, and he has the responsibility to make sure it doesn't happen? Huge responsibility. It's his job now to make sure nobody in Manchester suffers in the way that the 19 people who died last night suffered and the 50 people who've been injured. And I can't imagine anybody literally in the world anywhere now who's got more responsibility on his shoulders than Chief Constable Ian Hopkins.
Indeed, and very, very steady as she goes in terms of what he said. What he did give out was a police number for anyone who wishes to try and find anything out about the incident. So let me give that to you. It's 0161 856 9400. 0161 856 9400 is the number to call if you've either got any information or you require any information from the police. We've been giving out other numbers, which we'll continue to do as well, because there are people, of course, who are without their children, who have been separated from their children. Some children still being held at the Holiday Inn Express near the Manchester Arena. We'll give you that number out as soon as we have it as well. A lot of newspapers changing their front pages, of course. Terror at the Arena, Manchester Evening News. Teenagers flee in panic from gig. A picture of a young woman leaving, looking like, I suppose, what you would describe as a member of the Walking Wounded. What we do know so far, Mike, 19 people have been killed, over 50 people injured. Theresa May, the Prime Minister, calling it an appalling terrorist act. It looks as though we are now dealing with that rather than anything else. Let's now talk to a man who knows a little bit about terrorism and responses to terrorism. He is Bill Braniff, Executive Director for START. Bill, I'm going to say a good morning to you, but it's a very terrible morning for us here in the UK.
Yes, and my condolences go out to you and the people in Manchester.
Yeah,
Bill, at the beginning, this incident sort of unfolded rather slowly for us. I mean, obviously, when the last incident happened at Westminster Bridge, there was footage of it pretty much practically as it was happening. It was very clear that there was a terrorist incident underway, or at least as far as we knew. This one, it sort of unfolded in a rather unusual way at first. Nobody was really sure if it was an explosion, if there was an explosion, exactly where it happened, what the injuries were. I mean, is it possible there's a new sort of tactic going on here from the government's perspective on the release of information and how quickly it gets out?
I wouldn't assume that that's what's going on. These are inherently chaotic events, and especially if there's no perpetrators who are sort of apprehended at the scene, there really are just a lot of questions in the immediate aftermath of an unpredicted and violent incident. And it does take a while for the authorities to piece together enough of what happened that they could confidently tell the general public what they know and what they don't know in a way that will inspire both trust and as well as confidence in their abilities to bring the people to justice. So I think they're probably just moving cautiously because of how, what a shock this was to the community.
You're absolutely right, Bill. I mean, the point is the world is so jittery at the moment that when an individual suddenly starts smashing his car around Times Square in New York for reasons that we don't really still know about, one assumes initially this is a lone wolf, random, evil terrorist. But in fact, it didn't turn out like that. But I bet you, for the first, hour or so after the incident was reported, people like yourself would have had a very heavy suspicion this guy had political motives.
Sure. Unfortunately, we have let terrorist tactics and terrorist attacks capture our imagination.
Yep.
And it becomes an explanation for things, even though it's actually a fairly rare phenomenon. It doesn't happen that often. It doesn't happen that often in the West. And so I think the authorities try to take a sober approach to this and really make sure that they're not creating more undue panic by talking about details before they're confirmed. But at the same time, even though this is something that happens rarely, it does happen on occasion, and of course, it has to be treated with the utmost, significance when it does.
Sure. We were talking earlier, Bill, about the IRA's terror campaign, and Mike was remembering that there was a massive bomb that went off in Manchester, but because of their warning system, it tended to be more damaging to property than it was to human
people,
life, as it were. But it was a massive bomb that completely destroyed the centre of Manchester. We're now dealing with a completely different enemy, if you like, aren't we? Because not only do they not give warnings, but they're interested in creating as much mayhem and chaos as possible. And as the IRA once famously said, we only have to be lucky once.
Right. Unfortunately, there is truth empirically to the idea that terrorism is becoming a more lethal tactic, especially in terms of the number of high casualty events. That being said, in 2016, only about 5% of the terrorist attacks killed more than 10 people during that attack. So terrorist attacks that killed more than 10 victims are still relatively, they're the minority, 5% or so of attacks. Most terrorist attacks still remain non-lethal. About 46% of attacks in 2016 did not kill anyone. And so, unfortunately, though, it's these high-profile attacks in which a lot of people lose their lives that dominate our thinking about terrorism, and that actually magnifies the psychological impact of the tactic, because we assume that they're also lethal when in fact it's only a certain handful in a given year that may be this lethal.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, Bill, I accept your facts, absolutely. It's no comfort to the 19 families in Manchester tonight who are getting a knock on the door, or already had a knock on the door, saying that... And then what I always get the mental image of, Bill, is, because I've seen it actually happen in parts of the world, is all the bodies laid out in a mortuary somewhere, and then you really, really start to appreciate the sheer horror of what has happened, and that's what we're coping with in Manchester. Bill, can I ask you, we've always for many, many years assumed that America, as the leader of the free world, was the world's policeman. Do you think that America has a responsibility to try and lead the war against terrorism with the technology you have? Is there going to be a way to beat these lone wolf guys? Will we have fantastic sort of camera recognition technology which shows a man's face is planning an atrocity and things like this?
Well, I do think that the United States government and many other governments are investing a lot of resources in trying to identify technologies that can help interdict plots as early as possible. But at the end of the day, the United States cannot in any way, shape, or form do this alone or even really lead in an unparalleled fashion, because this is something that requires international coordination, information sharing, and frankly, human intelligence. And the United States does not have a monopoly by any stretch of the imagination on human intelligence. We need partners in Jordan, and we need partners in other countries in the Middle East and the Muslim world. We need our partners, the Five Eye partners, including Great Britain, in order to do this. So I hope that we'll continue to lead, but we need help. We need to work on it together.
One of the situations that's being speculated upon, I suppose, Bill, you might say, is whether or not this was, in fact, a suicide bombing attack, which is something we haven't seen an awful lot of in this country. Obviously, there were the 7/7 guys who had the bombs in the rucksacks. We haven't really seen a sort of suicide vest type situation in this country. What, if anything, have you been able to glean from what you've seen so far that might suggest that that is the case, or that it might have been something else other than that?
I certainly do not have any insight into this particular attack. Like everyone else, I'm following the news and hoping that somehow this was not a sophisticated attack that would suggest the potential for future violence. If it turns out that this was a suicide terrorist attack, you have to be then concerned if there wasn't a bomb maker that made more than one suicide vest, right? Is there another one out there or another three out there, et cetera? So, these are the kinds of things that the authorities will be looking into, but I certainly don't have any particular insight. And what we do know is that often early reporting that come out of these horrific events turn out to not be entirely factually accurate. So I think we all have to wait and see as facts.
We do. But we also know, for example, that in the recent weeks in this country, I don't know how closely you follow what goes on here, but there were some arrests made. There was a shooting of a Muslim woman who was wearing a burqa, I believe, getting off a bus up in northwest London near Willesden. There was another bunch of arrests in East London recently. I mean, you wonder whether with the kind of intelligence levels that we have in this country, whether there was a sense that there was a sort of a raising of the game, if you like, from some of these so-called lone wolf types or from ISIS sympathisers, because there's been at least 2 incidents in which arrests have been made of people who were planning terrorist attacks, and you wonder if this is part of that.
Right. There's always a chance when law enforcement conducts an intervention or an interdiction that that forces other people who are either involved in that conspiracy or who are just inspired to conduct acts of violence to execute their plot more quickly. They're afraid that the law enforcement community might get wise to them, and so they accelerate their attack timeline. That's always a risk, but of course the law enforcement community has to weigh that risk against not conducting the intervention in the first place, and that's just usually something they can't do. They can't just sit back and not conduct that kind of an intervention if they do have other suspects who they feel are an imminent threat. But we're dealing with the kind of threat where you don't have perfect information as a law enforcement community, and you have to make your best judgment call about how you can preserve human life and to the best of your ability. But these are not easy decisions. It'll remain to be seen whether or not that's what happened in this case, or if it is actually just coincidence, given the high level of counterterrorism operations in many Western European countries and in the United States. The possibility that this was just a coincidence in timing is also very, very real.
Sure, absolutely. Well, listen, Bill, thank you very much indeed for taking the time
thanks,
to talk
Bill.
to us. Bill Braniff, their Executive Director for START, Study of Terrorism and Responses to Terrorism. This incident being watched very carefully, of course, from the other side of the Atlantic. We've also got Amber Rudd now, the Home Secretary, referring to this as a barbaric act. So I don't think there's any doubt really whatsoever within government circles, anyway, of precisely what this is. This is TalkSport.
The Two Mics, simulcast across the UK on Talk Sport and Talk Radio.
This is Talk Sport. We are the Two Mics, of course. We're broadcasting live on Talk Radio as well. There's many pieces of information which are coming into us. We heard just a little while ago from Ian Hopkins, the Chief Constable of Manchester Police. He gave out a helpline number, which is this, 0161 856 9400. If you need any information from the police, only, of course, call them if you've got information for them or if you require something specific from them. 0161 856 9400 is the number to call. Of course, one of the things that we will be looking into over the course of the next few hours is precisely what happens to the election campaign. Only yesterday, of course, the big story was Jeremy Corbyn and his inability to completely and utterly deny bombing by the IRA
which
at a time when he was asked about it.
Some huge headlines in tomorrow morning's papers,
indeed,
which will disappear in the next edition because of the atrocity in Manchester.
Disappear. But let's talk now to Jason Farrell, who is, of course, from Sky. He's the senior political correspondent there, to find out from him what, if anything, is going to happen to the election campaign as a result of what happened last night at the Manchester Arena. Jason, a very good morning to you. Thanks for joining us.
Hi there. Well, I mean, from our perspective, we've come off the campaign trail. We were with Jeremy Corbyn's camp. We were expected to be going down to the Midlands tomorrow, do some campaigning there, follow some rallies. I'm almost entirely convinced that they will be cancelled. We know that Conservatives are cancelling all of their events, and that's guaranteed, really, from all the political parties tomorrow. As you'll remember with Jo Cox, when she was murdered during the referendum campaign, that obviously led to cancellations of activities as well. This is a massive event, tragedy that's happened here in Manchester. All focus will be on that now in terms of news coverage, as well as, obviously, Theresa May is going to be involved with Amber Rudd, the Home Secretary, talking about this event. And they'll be attending COBRA meetings tomorrow and trying to gather intelligence, talk to the police and intelligence services about how to go forward with this. So this is, it's obviously massively going to interrupt the next few days of election campaigning, I would say, in what is, you've only got a couple of weeks left, so it is, it's quite a major disruption.
Yeah, I mean, Jason, it's not only going to be, as you describe it, a massive disruption to the election campaign, isn't it also going to be a massive test to politicians? The way that Mrs May, as the incumbent Prime Minister, reacts, the way that she will have to direct her thoughts to the Chief Constable of Manchester, who has a huge responsibility to make Manchester safe over the next 48 hours, and how Mr Corbyn will respond, bearing in mind he's facing all sorts of accusations tonight about, connections with IRA terrorists, which prolonged the IRA war.
Well, yeah. The Corbyn team has, dismissed the latest headlines, saying that they come from a disreputable source about his associations with the IRA. But obviously, you will have seen the interview Sophie Ridge did on Sunday, where he wouldn't directly condemn the IRA, and he did, however, condemn all bombings that happened during the Troubles, but again, didn't react as you might expect many politicians would, just outright condemn the IRA. You're right. It's a test for both of them. Sometimes you tend to think these things favour the incumbent in a way, because after these sort of events, people look for stability,
leadership,
continuity. So far we've just had the statement. So, Theresa May saying thoughts with the families. She's obviously got to get on with looking at, the actual nuts and bolts of dealing with the investigation, talking to emergency services, talking to intelligence services about what they're doing. Jeremy Corbyn has also tweeted a response saying that his thoughts are with the families as well, saying that the emergency services are doing a terrific job. So even though you make a good point, because, of course, campaigning stops, but the electorate don't stop judging the politicians and how they react to this event. So, yeah, you're right. People will still be judging them, and they'll be still obviously be conscious of that and wanting to do the right thing. Do they both come to Manchester tomorrow, or, do they not want to look like they're election campaigning? These are quite important decisions they have to make, and that they will be judged on.
Yes, that is an interesting point as well. Tim Farron supposedly has cancelled a trip to Gibraltar that he was going to make, and on that point, Jason, I mean, yes, of course, the thoughts of everyone are with the families of the people that have been affected by this terrible event. But at what point does somebody kind of blink first, if you like, and if they do suspend campaigning, who starts it again, and when do they make that decision?
Well, I think that probably they make a joint decision. I seem to remember, again, with the referendum campaign, as a good point of reference, that things kind of stopped over the weekend, although you'll remember there was the inappropriate poster and all that sort of furore around Nigel Farage. But the real campaign again started sort of 2 or 3 days later. So even an event on the Monday after the attack, so sort of three or 4 days after the attack was cancelled, that the Remain campaign had lined up with a statement from the Bank of England that was completely cancelled, just didn't happen. The problem is then that, of course, the campaigns have got, they're all quite managed. They've got a series of statements that they want to make in the run-up to this campaign. And they have to then decide, well, are we going to drop this day that we were going to do on housing? We're going to push it back. So they've got to just really manage and rejig their campaign strategies. And I would think they will come to some kind of joint agreement where they'll say, okay, let's give it, till day X, and then we'll start again. And I would say, I don't know, but I would have thought possibly two days, maybe something like that. I mean, there isn't that much time left for campaigning, so they do have to try and get back to it at some point.
Yeah. The other point here, Jason, is that often politicians can be accused of bandwagon jumping, can't they? If they suddenly start, up in the ante on the way they feel about terrorism, how they'd attack it and all that kind of stuff, they could be seen to be using this appalling tragedy in the middle of an election campaign to try and seek an advantage.
Well, yeah, but they also know that the public can see through that. Yeah. And so they have to play that one quite carefully. That can really backfire. So yes, it's just getting the balance right, isn't it?
Yes, I totally agree. I referred earlier, Jason, but you sound far too young to have been aware of it yourself, of the Erin Neave situation when Mrs Thatcher was first campaigning to become Prime Minister. He was, as you probably know, a very close colleague of hers, and he was killed by the IRA in a Mercury car bomb attack in the House of Commons. She had to recover from that and go on, and she became Prime Minister, but it shaped her prime ministership for years and years after that in the way she treated terrorism and the IRA. Do you think that Mrs May will be similarly influenced by this happening during her election campaign?
That's a very, a very interesting kind of way of looking at it. I think, prime ministers are shaped by the events that happen under their, the time that they are in charge, and another one would be obviously Tony Blair and George Bush over the attack on the Empire State Building. That led to a whole change of foreign policy, which many say still seeing the consequences of today. And these things can. But that said, sometimes, the sad fact is that these terrorist attacks, certainly in Europe, have become, they are becoming more and more common. So there's this sort of like more united European approach to dealing with it. This is a common threat across Europe, and they have to. It has to shape the way that leaders deal with these things, because they, especially in these circumstances, they are a security threat. They have to be dealt with. It's difficult with this one, isn't it? Because I know we know sometimes these things are linked to ISIS.
Yes.
Sometimes, such as the attack on Westminster quite recently, it's a bit of a lone wolf just doing something a little bit crazy, who may be influenced in some way by radical Islam, but may not have any particular links to terrorist groups. So you can't, each individual incident has to be looked at very separately and individually.
Absolutely.
It does indeed. Jason, thank you very much
thanks
indeed.
very much
Appreciate
indeed for your time.
For coming on. Jason Farrell there, the political correspondent from Sky News, telling us about what's likely to be the effect on the election campaign. Theresa May has announced that she has suspended her election campaign. Jeremy Corbyn the same. It will probably be suspended for a couple of days, we suspect. Tim Farron, who was due to visit Gibraltar, has also cancelled that. I've just got a statement here from the Department of Homeland Security, Mike, over in the United States of America, saying that they are monitoring the situation at Manchester Arena in the United Kingdom. We are working with our foreign counterparts to obtain additional information about the cause of the reported explosion, as well as the extent of injuries and fatalities. So nothing coming from them as to specifically what kind of explosion it was, whether it was a suicide bomber or not. They say that they should heed direction from local authorities and maintain security awareness, US citizens in the UK, that is, and they say they don't see a specific credible threat involving music venues, perhaps in the United States or anywhere else. So Homeland Security obviously all over it, but not giving away anything that they may know that we don't know.
I don't think there's a national coordinated terrorism, network around the world that says you do London tonight or you do Manchester that night, and we'll do Tokyo. It is random. It's I'm certain it's random because
I think you're right.
Because if it was anything like more organised, the intelligence forces would pick up on it. They pick up on messaging, they pick up on communications, they pick up on, drifts of persuasive notes and all this kind of stuff.
This was my point earlier about the two recent sort of arrests, where they've arrested a few people up in northwest London, Wilston, which included one of those shots being fired at the woman who ended up in hospital, and those people are still under surveillance, or at least under arrest, as far as I know.
Yes.
And then there was the other incident just last week over in East London, where about four other people were arrested because of the belief that they were involved in some kind of a terrorism plotting.
Yes.
But whether that's connected to what went on last night in Manchester, we just simply do not know.
No.
But we will bring you all the news as it comes in. Certainly the police are treating the explosion as a terrorist incident. It's being called a barbaric act by Amber Rudd, the Home Secretary. It's been called an appalling terrorist act by Prime Minister Theresa May. I don't think there is any now doubt in what happened last night. So far, 19 people have died, and as many as 50 other people are injured. You're listening to the Two Mics on TalkSport and Talk Radio.
The Two Mics, simulcast across the UK on Talk Sport and Talk Radio.
This is Talk Sport and Talk Radio. We are the Two Mics. We are reporting for you, I'm afraid, on a terrible situation up in Manchester. If you're just joining us, a Manchester concert explosion, which has resulted in the deaths of 19 people, mostly young people, probably, because it was a concert by Ariana Grande, one of the top I guess, pop stars in the entire world, one of the top 10 pop stars in the entire world. A massive concert at the Manchester Arena last night. Around about 10:30, a bomb exploded outside the arena, we believe somewhere between the foyer area and the box office. We're being told that up to 59 people
59 now is the revised figure.
From being wounded. Let's have a listen to Ian Hopkins, who's the Chief Constable of Manchester Police, speaking a little bit earlier.
Around 10:33 p.m, we received reports of an explosion at Manchester Arena in the city centre. This was at the conclusion of the Ariana Grande concert. Currently, we have 19 people confirmed to have lost their lives in the explosion and around 50 casualties that are being treated at 6 hospitals across Greater Manchester. My thoughts are very much with those that have been injured and lost their lives and their loved ones at this terrible time. We are doing all that we can to support them. Officers from Greater Manchester Police and Emergency Services are working at the scene and are supporting those affected. We are coordinating the operation here at Greater Manchester Police Headquarters. An emergency number is available for all those concerned about their loved ones or anyone who may have been in the area. The number is 0161 856 9400. We are currently treating this as a terrorist incident until we have further information. We are working closely with National Counter-Terrorism Policing Network and UK intelligence partners. This is clearly a very concerning time for everyone. We're doing all that we can, working with local and national agencies to support those affected as we gather information about what happened last night. As you will understand, we are still receiving information and updates, so we'll provide further detail when we have a clearer picture. I want to thank people for their support and would ask them to remain vigilant, and if they have any concerns at all, to report them to the National Anti-Terrorist Hotline. The number is 0800 789 321. It is important also that people here in Manchester avoid the area around Manchester Arena so that emergency services can continue to effectively deal with the incident at that location.
That's the Chief Constable of Manchester Police, Ian Hopkins, speaking there. The other number that he gave out there, the terrorism hotline, 0800 789 321. Obviously, if you saw anything or if you know anything, that's one number to call. That's 0800 789 321. Also, a police helpline number, 0161 856 9400. We were reporting earlier as well, Mike, that anyone looking for some children who you might have not been reunited with or reconnected with after the show, many of them are being held at Holiday Inn Express by the Holiday Inn in Manchester, and we'll give you out a number for that as well. As soon as we can.
I mean, there's some pretty heartbreaking messages already coming out on social media, right? What about this one here? Help. My brother went to see his favourite singer, Ariana Grande, with my sister in Manchester, and I haven't heard from them. Please retweet, which of course we will, because if we can do anything whatsoever to try and help, and I've just retweeted that, to locate these children. Now, as you've just heard from MJ, a lot of these children are in the Holiday Inn Express, is it?
I believe so,
that's right.
Near the MEN.
Yeah, and it may be very difficult to get across Manchester. Parents who are on their way to try and find their children will be held up by an awful lot of roads being closed off because, of course, you're looking here at a huge crime scene. 19 dead, 59 people injured, and already people speculating, and I'm not talking about just random people. Matt Lawton is one of the best sports journalists of his age. He's won awards and all that kind of stuff. And Matt is getting involved in this because, of course, it's a human story, and sports reporters aren't immune to that. And he says huge police presence across the centre of Manchester. Now, this could be something to do with the fact that maybe he's up there because of the build-up to the Manchester United final, which is taking place.
Well, as I said earlier, Wednesday night is the Europa League final between Manchester United and Ajax. You would have thought that Manchester would have been at the centre of the world's press for different reasons.
Exactly, but Matt, who was up there, says GMP, Greater Manchester Police, unable to confirm the ages of those killed tonight, but one fears they were kids.
Yeah.
Now, this must be something he's picking up locally, that this is the... I mean, you've already touched on that, but we don't have any evidence of who the victims are.
We only
but we do know there was a very high percentage of youngsters, children, teenagers.
Certainly young teenagers and sort of 11, 12-year-old people who are Ariana's fans.
Yep.
And funnily enough, we have a statement from her manager now, Scooter Braun, who has said, "Our hearts are broken. We mourn the lives of children and loved ones taken by this cowardly act." So, I mean, they're saying that as well. So it's a terrifying idea.
Yeah.
But let's listen to Steve Crosby. He, of course, is a witness whose flat backs on to the MEN Arena, and he told them what he'd heard.
I was sitting in my living room with my boyfriend, and we were just chatting away, and we both heard these two loud bangs, and we didn't understand what it was. We didn't know if it was just someone outside with the bins or an actual bomb, which we thought the second thought we thought it might have been, because we knew Ariana Grande was performing live in the MEN Arena. So when we were sitting there for like 5 minutes afterwards, and my boyfriend's dad woke up and said, "Did you hear that?" So then he came in and showed me the phone and showed me, like, it's on the news that the bombs actually happened.
And so you look over the steps at the back. When you looked out of the window, describe to me exactly what you saw.
The first second when I looked out the window, I was seeing about 5 ambulances behind each other going towards the arena, and then behind that there was about 6 police cars and about 6 riot vans, but that was obviously going towards the front of the arena where Victoria Station starts, and there was a few police cars and ambulances at the back where the car park starts.
Did you see any... What happened next? What did you see next?
After that, I just thought it has to be something serious if there's that much like emergency service coming to the actual scene. So then when I seen all that, I looked on my phone on the news and I actually seen a picture of someone that they uploaded on Facebook, I think it was, and they seen smoke coming from the top of the arena, which made me think that's more than just a speaker blowing up, which people was presuming it was.
And when you looked out the window, did you see anyone coming out of the arena?
As soon as I looked out the window, there was people outside my apartment, and people was hugging each other crying, and they had these big pink balloons that obviously was appearing in the arena because Ariana Grande was wanting them. But there were people crying, so I thought there must be something serious and there must be some really deaths or something severe.
Did you see anyone injured?
I didn't see anyone injured, but I seen people running towards my house, which is away from the arena, which is going down towards south of Manchester. So it was kind of like there must be something serious if people are running away from that direction.
Steve Crosby there, whose flat backs onto the MEN Arena, talking to Sky News a little bit earlier on. We've got lots more to do. We'll be bringing you this throughout the night here on TalkSport and Talk Radio. 19 people have been murdered by the looks of things, and it's now being called a terrorism act pretty much straight up and down. This is TalkSport.
The Two Mics, simulcast across the UK on TalkSport and Talk Radio.
This is Talk Sport and Talk Radio. We are the Two Mics. Some very, very bad news. Ariana Grande was performing last night at the Manchester Arena. A bomb exploded by the looks of things outside the MEN, just as a lot of the people were leaving. We don't yet know what the casualty numbers are specifically, but we know that so far 19 people have lost their lives. Another 59 or so have been taken to hospital with injuries. We're not sure how serious those injuries are. We don't know yet either what the makeup of the people who have died, who have lost their lives is, but we believe there might have been an awful lot of young people involved. We mentioned earlier, Mike, that the Holiday Inn in Manchester, near the Manchester Arena, is holding several children, as many as 45 children who have become separated from their parents. That number, if you need to call it, if you're looking for anybody, is this, 07896 711 298. And the person running that operation is Paula Robinson. So if you've lost any children, you're trying to hook up with them, please phone this number, 07896 711 298.
Yeah. Can I also say that we've got a pretty wide reach on social media here, so if you do have a personal concern, if you want to send us a message, we will regurgitate that message as far around the world as we can. Yeah. And Ariana Grande has actually tweeted herself, I'm broken from the bottom of my heart. I am so, so sorry. I don't have words. Which is, as much as there are many terrible things about what's happened tonight, but for a young woman like Ariana Grande, who's only really been in the business for no more than about 4 or 5 years, it's a terrible, terrible thing to have happened. Yeah. She has 45.5 million followers. Yeah. Right? So that is a very necessary message that a young lady like her who can reach out to so many people in the world. I mean, that message you've just read out has already been retweeted nearly 50,000 times. Right. So, when she speaks like that, and another 73,000 people have approved of the message, another 20,000 have replied to her, and that is a very, very important message, and I think for a 22-year-old young lady like that to have done that is a very fine and decent thing. Yeah, absolutely right. I mean, the ambulance service, and this goes without saying, really, but obviously up in Manchester and even around the whole area of Manchester, we've been told that the ambulances have been coming in from as far away as Stoke to the south, from the Lake District to the north. The ambulance service have said, please only call for absolutely life-threatening emergencies tonight. A large number of resources are still at the scene of the incident at Manchester Arena, and also similarly, the police have asked people not to venture anywhere near the area. Victoria Station is shut down. There will not be any trains going in and out of that for a very, very long time to come, I suspect, for at least the next 24 hours. There is still forensic work going on, there is still recovery work going on, and there is still medical work going on as well. So please do bear all of that in mind. And as we said earlier, Ian Hopkins, the Chief Constable of Manchester Police, says they are continuing with their investigations. If you have any reason to call the police, the number is this, 0161 856 9400.
100. We'll be bringing you the news as it comes in. It's a very, very sad night. As we were saying earlier, Mike, one of the probably largest it will end up terrorist atrocities that have been committed on these British Isles.
And the longer the night goes on and the less information we're receiving about the nature of the victims, the more I'm fearing that the victims are young people.
Yeah.
Because it is so much more sensitive than when it's an adult.
Absolutely right.
The Two Mikes, simulcast across the UK on Talk Sport and Talk Radio.
This is Talk Sport and Talk Radio. We are the Two Mikes. We're here with you throughout the course of the night. There's an awful lot of people paying tribute, of course, to the victims up in Manchester, including quite a few people from the world of pop music. We've got Nicki Minaj saying, "My heart hurts for my sister Ariana and every family affected by this tragic event in the UK. Innocent lives lost. I'm so sorry to hear this." Pink says, "My thoughts and prayers are with the people of Manchester, anyone affected, Ariana Grande and the entire crew. Heartbreaking." Taylor Swift.
Yes, well, I mean, it's fantastic, isn't it, that names as big as that. Katy Perry, Taylor Swift, KT Tunstall said she'd just finished performing in London when she heard the gut-wrenching news. She says, "I'm so very sorry for the families who've lost loved ones." And, even bands like Nickelback, who I've never heard of, frankly.
Nickelback, big band,
Yeah, exactly. Are saying, "Manchester, you're in our hearts, thoughts and prayers. We're sending all our love and light to those affected. Stay strong." It massively affects people, this sort of thing, because you think about your own mortality, but at the same time, you think about how you would feel if your family was touched by such an appalling incident.
Yeah.
And therefore, the milk of human kindness is all about self-preservation, but extending to those who have lost. We know how badly you're hurting,
Yeah, indeed.
That's what it's all about.
It was a massive event, really, in Manchester as well, because Ariana is a massive star.
Yes.
And lots and lots of people who are fans of hers range from not just people in the business that she knows, because, as you said, she's 45 million followers.
45.5 million followers.
On Twitter. Amongst those people who were at the show was Emmerdale actress Isabel Hodgkins. She spoke to our colleagues at Sky News.
The concert had finished and we were all leaving, and then there was a big bang to our left, and then everybody just ran away from that immediate area. So we didn't know what had happened, but then nobody was really, people were screaming and running, but then it kind of died down. So we didn't know if a balloon had gone off, because balloons had been released in the concert, so we didn't know if it was that. And then everybody was panicking, they was pushing up the stairs, people were obviously running, climbing down and over the chairs. And then as we got out, just everybody was screaming and crying. And then the corridor was full, it smelled of burning. And there was quite a lot of smoke as we were leaving in the corridor, and an area had been blocked off so you couldn't go any further. But we managed to get out quite quickly. And then there was just lots of police and ambulances arriving as we were leaving.
So what part? You're the first person we've actually heard from who said that there was a smell of burning and smoke. Can you pin down where that was coming from? What part of the arena complex that might have been in?
We left on the side road, so it wasn't the main entrance. It was as you'd go out, and then there was the kind of the bridge underneath where you'd go in towards the ticket office. So we came out the steps that way on our side road. So to the right of the steps that come out near Victoria Station, it was around the corner from there.
And how do you feel now, hearing from the police that there are a number of confirmed fatalities and others injured? How do you feel about being there and witnessing this?
Yeah, it's just terrifying, and it's really shocking, and my heart goes out to anybody, with anybody that's been hurt or anything like that. Obviously, it's just terrifying. We didn't know what was happening, so we just wanted to get out of Manchester and be safe. And then, obviously, as it's progressed and the story's developed, it's just shocking, and we just feel very shaken up, but lucky to have got away safely.
And in those early minutes of confusion where people were screaming and then they stopped screaming, was there any guidance as to what to do? Certainly, we spoke to one person who was some distance away from the marina, said that they heard an automated message telling people to evacuate. Did you hear that?
Yes, it was because when we were trying to leave, obviously the corridor was just full of people, and then as we were leaving, that was when the tannoy was going off saying that you needed to evacuate the area.
We might be losing your line, but just one final thought. How would you sum up how people were responding? Was there a sense of panic, or was it a fairly ordered evacuation?
No, it was because it's such a big arena. It was just sheer panic, and nobody knew what had gone on. Because people thought it was just a balloon, and obviously people just didn't know. So I think because nobody knew what, panic, wanting to leave and get away, get safe.
That's Isabel Hodgins, I should say, from Emmerdale, talking to Sky a little bit earlier on. I'm just looking here, Mike, as well. We were talking about the Holiday Inn and the sort of service they've been doing.
Yes.
Lots of teenage girls apparently were taken to the Holiday Inn Express Hotel, and they were tweeting out their phone numbers. There's been a kind of avalanche of information on social media because worried parents had turned up. If you can just imagine the end of the show.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, where there's lots of people coming out. You've probably arranged to meet your daughter or your son at a particular point.
You can't get there.
You can't get there. There's suddenly all sorts of mayhem going on. You don't really know why. There's quite a few bits of video from people inside the arena at the moment the bomb goes off or the moment the explosion can be heard.
Yes.
And you just see this kind of look of panic and horror on people's faces saying, we don't know what that is. What was that? They're inside the arena and there's clearly no problem in there.
Yeah, we've just seen a bit of video which you found from tonight, posted by somebody inside the arena. And they're moving around, then you hear the muffled explosion, bang. And I thought I saw a flash as well that might have come in through the windows in the roof or the ceiling or something. And then people start to turn to each other and say, oh, my God, what's going on? So they heard it live. They must have known by the extent of that explosion what it was. You know, that it didn't sound like anything else but a bomb.
Yeah.
And from that moment on, the panic will have set in that we've got to get out of this building because they would have thought the building would have been under attack.
Sure.
So, and the other bit of video we've seen tonight, mate, was a driver had a camera on his dashboard, and we first saw a flash from the direction of the arena, and then we heard the rumbling explosion because obviously light travels faster than sound. Now, the point you've just made is that some parents driving towards the arena would have seen exactly the same thing.
They may have done,
because they would be heading for that building to pick their children up outside, and they would have probably got no further, if you see what I mean.
Sure.
Because the minute that happened, then there was going to be a situation in which people rushed to the scene. Anybody trying to make it to the arena would have been in a state of complete panic. People would have been running out, pouring into the roads, and chaos just rules. So, you know, I think one of the most important things now is to get all those children reunited with their parents so that we can bring some stability to the sheer horror by numbers of the situation of children who are unaccounted for.
Absolutely right. Apparently the Premier Inn in the same area has also got some of the children, but there's a couple of hashtags. If you are on Twitter and you are desperately looking for somebody that you know was at the concert and you haven't been able to find them, try this, hashtag Room for Manchester, and the other one, of course, is, where's the other one? I'm trying to find it. It's not Room for Manchester, it's something similar to that.
We'll find that and come back to it.
Because basically taxi drivers have been helping people get home.
Yes.
A lot of hotels have thrown their doors open and allowing people to stay there for nothing, which is very, very good. And lots of parents who are trying to get hold of their kids are using those hashtags to get around.
Sure.
Manchester Evening News front page we've got here in front of us. Terror at the arena. Teenagers flee in panic from gig. Police treat explosions as terrorism. The Daily Mirror's gone with 19 dead in pop concert suicide bomb.
Yes.
We don't know why they would say that. You know, there's no absolute evidence that that's the case.
It's in inverted commas, isn't it?
It's in inverted commas.
So,
and then The Guardian goes quite hard on it, saying murder in Manchester, which, of course, is what it's beginning to look like.
Of course,
At least 19 die in arena attack. So it says fatalities come as countries on severe terror alert. And I was thinking, actually, watching that video from inside the arena where people suddenly are turning around in shock.
Saying, oh, my God,
as
what's
you hear
going
the
on?
sound. You know, as much as we are all at a very heightened state of terror alert, I suppose we're meant to be, it doesn't seem like that, does it? Because you go around doing your daily thing, you get on trains on a regular basis.
You have to.
I'm using the underground on a regular basis here in London.
You have to.
Buses and all the rest of it. I remember after the Bataclan incident and the whole business in Paris, when you had visions of people running down the street with heavy armoured machine guns.
Shooting people.
I mean, for a while, I remember being on the tube in London thinking, I wonder what will happen if I turn around onto this platform and there's a guy there with an AK-47.
That's right.
And you start thinking about stuff like that. But it didn't stop me going on the tube.
No, it doesn't.
And I don't think about it anymore.
I mean, for weeks, if not months, after the the terrible suicide bombings on the tube here, July 7, every time you got on a tube, you looked for somebody who had a black rucksack.
Yeah.
That went on for months.
Yeah.
Well,
after 7/7, I remember walking through. Do you know that scene from the Thomas Crown affair? At the end, where they're all wearing the same outfit, the guys with the hats.
Yes.
And there's thousands of them walking around. You can't tell. I was at Paddington Station because I'd come down. Bizarrely, I ended up having a meeting with Gordon Brown on the day that they tried to do it again.
Right.
And everywhere I looked, there was an Asian guy with a rucksack on.
Yes. Yeah.
And I just thought, well, this is ridiculous.
Yeah,
this is totally ridiculous.
Exactly, you get paranoid. Yeah, it's quite right.
Yeah.
I'm very interested to see that New York Governor Andrew Cuomo says security will be increased at high-profile locations across New York after the Manchester explosion. Now, that can only mean that, in his opinion, the consequence of what's happened in Manchester could be a copycat attacker anywhere else in the world.
Yeah.
Because, we are now beginning to see a pattern of these things happening, one after the other. You know, when somebody takes a lorry down a street in Nice and mows people down, it's starting to happen somewhere else, you know what I mean?
Right.
And Mr. Cuomo's not inexperienced, is he, in the world of politics?
He's certainly not.
And administration. So that, to me, is a good indication of the way that, he is thinking, the way America is thinking, because the Americans have a view, which was explained to us earlier by our American correspondent, that Europe is a cesspit of terrorism.
Well, indeed. I mean, we've seen the statement from Homeland Security over in the US, which has said that they're not led to believe there's any kind of reason to think that music venues will be under attack in the US.
Yeah.
But I guess, they have to take precautions. There's a report now coming out of TMZ, which, of course, is one of the foremost kind of celebrity websites, if you like.
Yeah.
They're saying that Ariana Grande will suspend her world tour in the wake of the bombing. We have heard from her people that she's broken. She's tweeted herself that from the bottom of her heart, she's so sorry she doesn't have words. They're saying that she's inconsolable and she's not able to perform at the moment. So more than likely the whole tour is going to be off.
Well, I said a few minutes ago, I think it'd be a great indicator, a great signal, a great rejection of, the scourge of this terrorist campaign if she got up on the stage and went ahead with it. However, her emotional state might render her incapable of doing that. And secondly, it could well be seen as being insensitive to the victims of the Manchester attack.
Yeah.
It's all very well saying the show must go on and, in the face of terrorism, we must show them that we go about our daily business and terrorists don't win. But on the other hand, by that time, there may be some very small victims of this terrible attack who have lost their lives, whose families are mourning, and who might not be best pleased that the woman who their children went to see is standing up on a stage somewhere else in the world 2 days after it and singing to other people. I think, on balance, having assessed all that in my own head, it would be better for her not to do it.
Yeah, very possibly so. Lee has tweeted, many people have tweeted many things tonight, some of which are not really worth reading out. This one is a kind of obvious statement. He's saying, is there no CCTV footage? Well, the answer to that is I'm sure there's lots of CCTV footage, but that's precisely what the emergency services are there for, to collect that and to study it and to look at it, not to issue it to people so that you can all decide what you think you can see.
Yeah.
The point is that there is a massive investigation going on. This will prove to be one of the biggest and most dreadful terrorism attacks on the mainland of this country.
It will.
So I think there's going to be probably lots to do in terms of investigating precisely what happened and when. So far, the police have confirmed 19 fatalities, for 19 murders, you might want to say, and 59 at least injured. We don't know the extent of those injuries. This is TalkSport.
The Two Mikes, simulcast across the UK on Talk Sport and Talk Radio.
This is Talk Sport. We are the Two Mikes. We're broadcasting live on Talk Radio as well. There has been a terrible, terrible incident overnight. If you're just tuning in, we are able to tell you that witnesses have been reporting all through the night so far an explosion that took place outside Manchester Arena. The Manchester Arena have confirmed that happened somewhere between what they believe to be the foyer and the box office. There are 19 people confirmed dead so far by Manchester Police. It is being called by Amber Rudd, the Home Secretary, a barbaric act. Sandy Waugh is here with an update. Sandy, very good morning.
Good morning to you. This is what we know so far then. 19 people have been confirmed dead and around 60 injured in an explosion at Manchester Arena. It happened just after 10:30 last night at the end of a concert by Ariana Grande. Police say they are treating what happened as a terrorist incident until they know otherwise. Around 6 hospitals in the region are treating casualties. Now, this is the moment that the incident occurred. I should warn you, you may find this distressing. Well, within the last hour or so, there's been a statement issued by the Chief Constable in the region, Ian Hopkins.
We are currently treating this as a terrorist incident until we have further information. We are working closely with National Counter-Terrorism Policing Network and UK intelligence partners. This is clearly a very concerning time for everyone. We're doing all that we can, working with local and national agencies to support those affected as we gather information about what happened last night. As you will understand, we are still receiving information and updates, so we'll provide further detail when we have a clearer picture. I want to thank people for their support and would ask them to remain vigilant, and if they have any concerns at all, to report them to the National Anti-Terrorist Hotline. The number is 0800 789 321. It is important also that people here in Manchester avoid the area around Manchester Arena so that emergency services can continue to effectively deal with the incident at that location.
Now, as you can imagine, in the immediate aftermath of this explosion, tremendous confusion and distress. Now, this woman, Jenny Brewster, was at the venue with her young daughter.
For the first 10 seconds, we thought about it and we just walked with haste. And then a gentleman said, "Run!" We walked quickly down the stairs. That's when people were flooding through the concert doors.
Now, it would appear that this explosion happened at the end of the concert, so as people were trying to leave through the foyer, and it caught many of them very young, unaccompanied girls in the blast. And there have been extremely distressing scenes posted up on media of parents waiting in the foyer to see their children, or expecting to see their children emerge to join them. Now, what's causing so much distress, I think, in the reporting of this is many, many eyewitnesses saying the floor of the arena was strewn with bolts and nuts, way above the level you would expect if it was just from the debris of a building. So this looks to be, it's very early to draw these sort of conclusions, but it looks that it may have been some sort of shrapnel-packed explosion that was involved. Now, police are urging people, as you heard there, to stay away from the area if you can, to allow the emergency service to continue, even this number of hours now after the explosion, to conduct their investigation. We have had reports of some young children being kept in hotels in the area for their own safety. But, of course, that's causing distress with families going on social media, posting pictures of their missing children, saying, "Do you know where they are? Can you tell me where they are?" Facebook has instigated the system it often brings in this occasion of allowing people to tag themselves as safe in the area. And they are urging people to use that because it does ease some of the pressure on the phone calls and the emergency services having to deal with people trying to get information about what's going on. Now, this is obviously an absolutely appalling and barbaric act. And in the middle of this, there are stories emerging, as there always are with these sort of incidents, of the way ordinary people respond. Now, I've heard there's one Liverpool taxi driver, whole company, that they've all jumped in their cabs, gone to the area and offered free lifts home to anyone they can find who needs to get out, because the railway network's been affected by this. Because, as you know, the arena is right near.
Station's
and
closed
so they
down.
closed the station to deal with this. There are any number of people tweeting rooms for Manchester. Come and stay with us while we know what's going on and what can be safe. There was one really distressing report of a man wandering around with his daughters who seemed to be sort of 10, 12, that sort of age, totally distressed about how to get out. He just wanted to get out with his girls.
Well, you're in a state of shock when you're in the vicinity of some appalling incident like this. You're shocked.
But an ordinary member of the public coming up to him and saying, "Look, I'm not a taxi driver. I have a car. Get in the car with me. I'll take you wherever you want to go to make you feel safe." And that sort of generosity of spirit helps a little to deal with this. But as I say, this is still a developing situation in terms of the investigation. But we know that certainly the emergency services in Manchester responding to an appalling incident about 10:30 last night.
These reports of nuts and bolts, Sandy, where exactly are they located?
This is the foyer area. So there was one man who's saying
outside.
This is around the area where if this is a bomb, and it does look like it may have been. So one of the eyewitnesses who he himself had quite a nasty head injury, and he was describing how his wife had to ask to lie down. She's got a bad stomach injury, and he noticed while she was bleeding on the ground, waiting for help, that scattered around them were this substantial number, as he described it, of nuts and bolts, enough that he was walking on them, kicking them as he was
And quite a few people's
walking.
Injuries would be consistent with that kind of thing, right?
Lots of volunteer medical helpers there. Because of the nature of this concert, they had a lot of young people volunteering to help with first aid training, St John Ambulance and so on. And they were saying that they've seen what they're describing as shrapnel injuries and this sort of shrapnel debris on the ground this morning. So it's clearly
although the fatalities are listed at 19, there's going to be scores more families in terrible distress at the moment because they are not reunited with their children.
And it's not... There are 60 injuries, and some of those injuries will probably be pretty horrible as well. So we are talking
life-changing.
A whole community has been affected by this. Now, Ariana Grande was performing. She's tweeted to say that she is broken by this, and her management team, so Scorta Brown Projects, saying they've been left heartbroken by the incident. They say words cannot express our sorrow for the victims and families harmed in this senseless attack. We mourn the lives of children and loved ones taken by this cowardly act. We are thankful for the selfless service tonight of Manchester's first responders who rushed towards danger to help save lives. We ask all of you to hold the victims, their families, and all those affected in your hearts and prayers. So that's from Ariana Grande's management team tonight.
And although it seems a trivial thing to mention at this juncture, she is planning, she is in the midst of a European tour. And, TMZ are reporting that she has in fact already decided to cancel that. We haven't got that officially, but she's supposed to be performing at the O2 in London towards the end of this week. More than likely, that's not going to go ahead.
It would seem pretty insensitive, wouldn't it?
There's two ways. There is another way of looking at that. One of the other ways of looking at that is to say the best way we can show defiance, and this is what some musicians have said in other circumstances, is to carry on as normal. I think what will be particularly concerning about the timing and the nature of this incident, we know there is massively increased security now when you go into these sort of events. The bags are screened and people are checked. This was people coming out. So this is the point at which you open all the doors, parents come in to meet their children and collect them, and that would seem to be the point at which this incident has occurred, where perhaps security is much lighter because
it's much more difficult to control.
Much more difficult. Yeah. Look, I'm going to go back and keep listening to what's going on. I'll bring you more updates as soon as I get them.
Sandy, thank you very much.
Thank
Indeed,
you.
Sandy War there. Stephen has tweeted us actually to say, I was invited to a football screening of Manchester United on Wednesday. Will those all still go ahead? Well, the answer, we don't know the answer to that. We don't yet know what the situation will be in Manchester. I suspect that the Europa League final will still go ahead. We've not been told there's any reason for that not to happen. Manchester United against Ajax, of course. What we don't know, though, is whether parts of Manchester will be effectively sort of no-go areas in the sense that, the security services will be asking for it still to be, not visited by members of the public. Victoria Station presumably will remain closed most of Tuesday, if not all of Tuesday and possibly Wednesday. The area around the Manchester Arena has already been designated by police as an investigation. So they've asked for
huge
people,
crime scene.
They've asked for people not to go anywhere near that part of town. And as you said earlier, it's a pretty vibrant part of the city, isn't it?
Of course it is. It's a hugely vibrant part of the city, very close to the Northern Quarter, very close to Ancoats and places which actually have been regenerated over the last couple of decades. When I worked in Great Ancoats Street, it was a complete pit. The only decent building there was the Black Nubianca, the Daily Express building. building. The rest of it was appallingly undernourished, for want of a better word, housing and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Jackie Beltrao, who of course is the sports correspondent for Sky News, says targeting an Ariana Grande concert, targeting kids, that is a new low. Jackie, of course, who we meet regularly when we go to Sky and review the papers there, very proud mother of her children. So proud, in fact, that last week when we were there, she'd take the day off because it was the first day of the GCSE exams for one of her children. And you know, as a very concerned mother, she will have put that message out. And I say, echoed the thoughts of millions and millions of parents in this country after the appalling incident last night.
Absolutely right. Ian Hopkins, Chief Constable, Manchester Police, did make a statement a little bit earlier on. We'll bring that to you again. But the number he gave out, if anybody has information or is seeking information, 0161 856 9400 is the number you need to call to get Greater Manchester Police. That's 0161 856 9400. More coming up live right here on Talk Sport and Talk Radio.
Being an All Black is in their blood. Being a Lion is in ours. The Lions Tour starts Saturday, June the 3rd, live only on Sky Sports. To upgrade, search Sky Sports Summer.
Golf. What? No sound effect?
Nah.
Not even a 4?
Get on with it.
Spanish maestro Seve Ballesteros only designed one UK golf course, the Shire London. So this summer, bring your friends to play Seve's masterpiece. 18 spectacular golf holes, beautiful clubhouse, great food, everyone's welcome. Book your golf day or green fee now at theshirelondon.com. The Shire London, home to the 2018 European Ryder Cup team captain Thomas Bjorn.
When you need all the latest form and odds on all the day's sporting action, and you need it fast, you need the Coral Daily Download. Get all the latest news and great offers on all the big games and all the biggest race meetings in one essential package, delivered to your ears at the speed of sound. Don't miss the Coral Daily Download every morning on the Alan Brazil Sports Breakfast from 6 on Talk Sport with Coral. Your best bet for breakfast.
The Two Mics, simulcast across the UK on Talk Sport and Talk Radio.
This is Talk Sport. We are the Two Mics. We're broadcasting live on Talk Radio as well. The morning papers, later editions will be coming in very shortly. But what we can tell you is that The Guardian changed up their earlier editions to have a headline that says "Murder in Manchester. At least 19 die in arena attack. Police treating blast as possible terrorist incident." I think we can probably harden that up now because this is some hours ago that they would set this page one. I mean, I think there's no doubt now that this is a terrorist incident.
Oh, of course it is.
The Home Secretary is calling it a barbaric act.
Yes.
So, you know, you don't call it a barbaric act.
No.
I suppose you could say it might be something other than terrorism, but I don't really think that's very likely.
It's not.
An appalling act is what it's being called by Theresa May.
The real terror of this one is that some of the victims may well be teenagers or younger children.
Yeah.
Now, you know, after working as we have for many, many years, there is a completely different sense of shock to the death of an adult compared to the death of a child.
Of course.
A completely different sense of shock, because what you are registering when you're being told that, you know, younger people have been killed is the complete waste of their future life, which they're never going to have.
Right.
Whereas if adults died, at least they've got into adulthood and at least they've lived a life, but the youngsters haven't. And that's going to be the real terror that we're all, having to steel ourselves to receive the information of later, you know, who are the victims, because at the moment there's no indication whatsoever. Just to reiterate to everybody that campaigning in the general election campaign has been called off for today. For instance, a statement says the Prime Minister's general election campaign is being suspended following the fatal explosion in Manchester. That's come from Tory HQ.
Yeah.
And I think Mr Corbyn's people have also expressed the same intention, have they
Sure,
not?
and Tim Farron as well was due to go to Gibraltar,
Yes.
I think, and he's called that off as well. And I mean, who knows how long that will go on for, because we were talking a little bit earlier to a correspondent who was telling us basically that you can't really stay away from the election campaign for too long.
No, you can't.
Because it's June the 8th when is the actual polling day. So of course, very, very shortly that is going to be something that has to be sort of picked up on again.
Yeah.
But I mean, a great deal of shock, I suppose, will be going through the political establishment as much as everything else. Because
of course
they spend so much time trying to make sure that they get intelligence on these kinds of attacks, and many of them are in fact foiled before they get anywhere near, fruition.
Yeah.
But this is a terrible, terrible situation.
Yeah, well, of course it is. And funny enough, you should say about daylight, because, we've all worked in the dark, so to speak, in terrible situations. Often terrible things happen at night. Explosions, car crashes, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And I've been on stories when, daylight has broken. Sometimes abroad, sometimes in places like Israel, and terrorism attacks and wars and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. And the sheer horror of what you've been experiencing during the night is even more graphic in daylight when it comes the next day.
Sure.
Whatever policemen and investigators saw last night in terms of the result of this explosion will be twice as bad in daylight today, because you see more. It's as simple as that.
Yeah.
And it's going to be a shocking 24 hours for the people who have to go to that scene and start work on an appalling crime scene involving potentially victims, which might include a lot of young children.
Yeah, and certainly some of the descriptions of some of the injuries that we've heard over the course of the last few hours have been terribly upsetting, to be honest, as well. So, but we will bring you all the news as much as we can. The confirmed news, of course, there's an awful lot of speculation going on social media. We would urge you not to take part in any of that. All you can know is what we know, which is what we're being told.
The Two Mikes, simulcast across the UK on Talk Sport and Talk Radio.
We are the Two Mikes. We've been broadcasting all night on TalkSport and Talk Radio. Sandy Wall has joined us. It seems just a few short hours, Sandy, from when the news first broke around about just after 10:30, 11:15 last night. I suppose at Manchester Arena there had been some kind of explosion. Strangely enough, we were both discussing before the show started for us at 1 o'clock that it wasn't that clear initially whether it was even an explosion that could have been put down as a bomb. It could have been something that went wrong inside the arena.
It's very hard, isn't it? In the immediate aftermath of an incident, if you recall, with the London bombings, initially it came in as a power surge and that there'd been an electrical fault, because you don't like to assume the worst in an incident. And there is so much social media being shared of what happened, and clearly an explosion can be heard, but there are, as we know, lots of things that can cause an explosion. I think it was these first eyewitness reports of the nuts and bolts lying around on the ground.
But that came hours later.
Was saying that this is clearly much bigger, and the sheer scale of the injuries that emerged.
The difficulty with these, I mean, everything's a difficulty when it's a terrorist attack, but the awkwardness of the situation is that because they're random and because they're lone wolf, there is not an expectancy factor that you might have in central London. So this happens in Manchester. It's a northern town. It's our, capital of the north or whatever. And what happened initially, and you can see this from the pictures outside, was that even the police were standing around bemused at what had happened and just sort of, cordoning the area off, but not with very much enthusiasm. Now, if this had been in London, I reckon a van load of armed policemen with machine guns would have arrived within seconds.
I'm not sure that's a fair comment on that one. Manchester has had terror attacks before. Famously, the whole centre of Manchester was pretty much rebuilt after the
the Arndale Centre attack was a car bomb, as you know, with a warning.
Absolutely, it's a different time.
Yeah,
and I think. You hesitate to say that.
I'm not criticising anybody, I'm just saying that this is what we're going to have to get used to: random attacks from lone wolf attackers who cause carnage and chaos, and sometimes the extent of it is overwhelming to everybody, including the authorities.
Yeah, I mean the pictures that you've seen of ambulance after ambulance responding really rapidly, getting to the scene and getting people away as fast as possible.
Also,
it's
I think
the timing of this that's so appalling, isn't it? It's as people were leaving leaving
As
at the
people were
end.
leaving,
So where doors are open, parents are coming to meet unaccompanied children. We are used to, as I was saying a short while ago, security when you go into events. Clearly, there's now going to have to be some thought about when you leave events as well. Because
but of course, many. I mean, we were at Wembley at the weekend for the playoff final, and many more people leave in a big group than arrive in a big group. So
absolutely.
actually, there's a bigger sort of target, if you like, for these people.
Absolutely.
As the thing is ending, rather than at the beginning when people are going in dribs and drabs.
And as you say, protecting against this sort of attack is nigh on impossible.
It is
the
impossible.
famous quote used to be with the IRA, wasn't it? That you have to be lucky every time. We only have to be lucky once.
Yeah.
You have to be lucky every time. We do know from what's told to us that the security services are preventing literally hundreds of incidents across the last, I think it was 3 years when they said it was something like 300. I mean, it seems almost invidious talking like this when we do have dozens and dozens and dozens of families traumatised, not to mention just the sheer number of young people that were there and would have seen
this is the very point, the nature of the target. Jackie Beltrao, who is the sports reporter on Sky News, has tweeted out to say, is this a new low in the world of terrorism, targeting, I mean, not just teenagers, it could be children younger than that. And, the experience we all have of covering these sort of ghastly events is that by now I would normally have expected some indication of the nature of the fatalities and the victims. We're not getting any of that, and that could be because the appalling reality of the situation is that some very young people may be the victims. They may be.
I think that's entirely possible.
Yeah.
Yes. As we what we know for sure is that this is an explosion in the foyer area. So it may have been, certainly from some of the injuries, it was the parents waiting to meet their children were also affected in that. But yes, so 19 dead, more than 50 injured, and
59.
Yes, I think it's actually 60. I think was the last one, but. What's the numbers game in this situation? And police expected to bring us another update. I would imagine probably in a couple of hours' time now, once they're able to give us a better picture of what's going on.
And remember as well, Sandy, as we speak now, this is 6 hours after the attack, 6-7 hours after the attack, there are still groups of bemused children in hotels in Manchester being looked after, thankfully by the hotel people there who volunteered to take children in, who are disassociated from their parents, who couldn't get there last night to pick them up because the roads had been sealed off, or because they just don't know where they are. They're supposed to meet them outside the arena. They're not there. Where have they gone?
We did have reports from one of the hotels of large numbers of children leaving, or young people leaving a while ago. So it may be that's now changing.
Hopefully.
But certainly there were hotels taking in groups of young people to provide sort of a safe haven.
Well, this is another,
as
you mentioned earlier on in the last hour, this is another sort of aspect of what has happened in Manchester, where there's been an awful lot of an outpouring of sort of togetherness and community, where people have promised to make sure that people can get home. Taxi services have been offering free rides. There's been a couple of buildings operating in parts of Manchester, one I think just not far away from the Manchester Arena, offering rooms for the night for free. Right. We had a guy call into the show actually who was a truck driver driving up from Corby to offer to take anyone up to Manchester who needed to get up there to try and meet loved ones perhaps. And it's been a very heartwarming night in some ways.
Brings out the best and worst, doesn't
learning
it?
about how people react to this kind of thing. I guess we'll be seeing the first editions, or the later editions, I should say, of the papers very shortly.
I've got them arriving with me now, some of the early ones. So The Guardian I've got in front of me, a paper very associated, of course, with Manchester. Murder in Manchester, at least 19 die in arena attack. And they have a picture of an injured man with bandages from his knees. And as you often see after these explosions, people's clothing in tatters, being helped down the stairs underneath one of those blue and white police tapes across the stairs, and another young lady in similar situation with her legs and arms battered as she's being walked away from the scene. Carnage at pop concert, says the Daily Mail. At least 19 dead and scores injured as terror blast rips through Manchester Arena. Bloodbath at pop concert, that's the Daily Mirror. Several killed, so they were a little bit earlier perhaps printing, as explosion rocks Manchester Arena gig. I think the Sun, we may have an older edition of the Sun. I think they may well be changing their front page, because some of them still have politics on the front page. And as we are suggesting, campaigning likely to be, I'm so certain to be.
No, it has been. It's been called off.
Totally suspended by everyone. I know the main parties have. Don't think we'd had confirmation from all of the minor parties yet, but they will do, no doubt. It would be inappropriate, I think.
Completely.
A Cobra meeting will be held to have a look at coordinating what we need to do in response to this.
But that's the other aspect, I suppose, in terms of the electioneering as such. I mean, the business of government actually has to go on, and for a while during electioneering, there is no government really, effectively. But today, of all days, we need a government.
Yeah, we do. But you're absolutely right. You know, the whole political machine has been geared to a general election campaign. Now they've got to swing out of that and swing into national, dire national emergency mode, because the one thing that the Chief Constable of Greater Manchester has got to do today is to tell people as they're waking up Manchester is a safe city today. He's got to make absolutely sure there aren't other people around of evil intent who might follow up on what happened last night. That's his main priority. He's got more pressure on his shoulders today, I think, than any other person in the world.
Absolutely right. Well, Sandy, we'll keep up with all of this as it unfolds. Thank you very much indeed. Sandy Moore there with a look at some of the papers this morning and how they're reacting overnight. And, of course, we will be bringing you all of the updates as they come in. Not too many updates over the last couple of hours, other than to know from Ian Hopkins, the Chief Constable of Manchester Police, that the investigation is ongoing, is likely to be ongoing for most of the day, certainly in that particular area. 0161856 9400 is the number to call the police on if you have any information for them, or indeed if you think they can help you with locating anyone who you may still be looking for. 0161856 9400.
You see, you wonder, Mike, whether, I mean, we don't know, even if it is a suicide bomber, but that has been circulated during the night, the potential it could be. If that's the case, they may not even have any identification on who this person is. And if that's the case, then they can't get round to wherever he lived in the area to find out whether he had his own bomb factory, whether there are other people who've lived there. I mean, this, the Greater Manchester Chief Constable had an enormous responsibility to crack this case today, to make sure that whoever was responsible does not have associates who are going to do the same thing.
Well, certainly we've learned in the past, when situations like this have arisen, that sometimes there is a coordinated attack in more than one place. That doesn't appear to have happened last night. There was at one point a controlled explosion which took place near the Manchester Arena, but it later emerged that was actually, in the end, not a suspicious package at all. And it was some clothes that had been left abandoned in a bag. Thankfully, it wasn't another device.
That's right.
But so far, they have not found another device. But you're quite right. If it does turn out to be either a device that was left in a bag, or it was actually on a person and somebody wearing a suicide vest, they may take a very long time to work out where that came from.
Even, Mike, if this guy lived in some bedsit in Crumps Hall or somewhere like that, some district of Manchester, he may have left behind remnants of other potentially explosive devices, which now might be lethal to people who live around him.
Sure, absolutely right. We've got much more coming up. Coming up at 6 o'clock, of course, on Talk Radio. Paul Ross takes over. We will be here until then, and Alan Brazil will be here on Talk Sport. We're the Two Mics.
The Two Mics, simulcast across the UK on Talk Sport and Talk Radio.
This is Talk Sport. We are the Two Mics. We've been broadcasting live all night on Talk Radio and Talk Sport. Coming up at 6 o'clock, Paul Ross is here with the full set breakfast. Paul, I'm not going to say good morning to you because it's not really a very good morning, but a lot to be getting on with.
Absolutely. It's one of those nights when you go to bed, and I go to bed earlier than most, I know, and the world changes and the world turns, and you wake up to terror and horror. And all of us, whether we're parents or not, whether we know Manchester or not, are absolutely united in horror and appalled sympathy this morning, because it's an absolutely astonishing atrocity. 19 dead, as you've been saying, guys, 59 hospitalised at 6 hospitals across Manchester. And the big question now is whether, who might take responsibility for this? And I've heard from people across the pond, across the Atlantic, saying that actually, so far, on the sites that are supportive of ISIS, Al-Qaeda and Islamic State, there's been no mention of it. But it often takes up to a day for anything to filter through. And these aren't the official sites from those hideous organisations. These are from supporters. Also, we do have, as you've been saying, the emergency number 0161 856 9400. That's 0161 856 9400. But the police have told us this morning, please only use that number if you have a genuine concern about a loved one, friend, family member who was at that concert or in that area. 0161 856 9400.
Got a tweet here from Robin, and we've been getting some of these throughout the course of the night because, of course, we now live in a global media empire and you never know what you're watching. But Robin says the USA media are now saying the bomber travelled on the train, got off and waited for the show to end. Why do they know so much? Well, the answer, Robin, is that they may not know so much. The fact is that, American media are a long way away from here. They're not being told that, certainly by the police. They're certainly not being told that by anybody in the government. And so they're speculating at the end of the day, and they may wish to do that. We can't do that.
We've also had reports this morning that the concert, as so often happens with pop concerts, ended later than expected. So maybe there's no calls for celebration in this, but maybe it could have been even worse had it finished on time, because maybe whatever happened was timed to coincide with more people through the exit.
I mean, there certainly are suggestions that the people who were making their way towards the exits were, in fact, meeting people who they arranged to meet, even though the show hadn't completely ended. There's a lot of footage, and you'll see it, I'm sure, over the course of the next couple of hours, of people inside the arena. Lights are up, so the show's over, and you hear the explosion, and you see their reaction. But they're all still inside the arena.
This represents yet another new tactic, Paul. You know, the terrorists invented the tactic of hijacking a lorry and driving it along a pavement, and they've invented successively new tactics over the years. Take a machine gun into a crowd and just kill as many people as you can. The tactic here seems to be getting people on the way out, not on the way in to an arena, because, of course, you are so vulnerable on the way out in the sense that you've got everybody in, nothing happened. Now we can open the doors and everybody can flock out. And there's literally, a wave of humanity passing out through the exits, which are, utterly incapable of defending themselves against anything like this.
And what is remarkable, though, is, as we'd expect from anywhere in this country, but certainly from the people I know in Manchester, people immediately help those who've been pushed to the ground because of that, as you said, that wave of humanity. Yeah. Cab drivers have turned up, offered their services absolutely free. I had an interview earlier on with a guy who happened to be a Sikh guy, and he only mentioned that in passing, who had a sign on his back of his cab, if you need a ride, it's free.
Yeah, sure.
People have come from Liverpool, from all over the place, offering their services, which is an amazing... That is the only way to respond to this kind of hideous atrocity, isn't it? To show our humanity and celebrate our humanity.
It is, I totally agree. And yet all of that bonding together, amongst decent people, will have no effect whatsoever on those who are minded to do this, because they are only out to destroy, they're only out to destruct. We've had people referring to the fact that this is a new low in terms of the sort of target or victim they're seeking, youngsters as young as perhaps 12 or 13, teenagers. But these guys don't think like that. They were thinking who's available, and if the availability happens to be a load of teenagers or children who are pouring out of the biggest indoor arena in Europe, to them that's fertile ground. That's fertile territory. This is the way these people think.
Absolutely right, and slightly worryingly, I mean, sometimes you read more into these things than you know, but there's a statement out from Ariana Grande's manager, Scooter Braun, who says, "We mourn the lives of children and loved ones taken by this cowardly act." Now, I don't know whether they know that there are children involved.
Well, she knows how many were in the audience, doesn't she?
But what I'm saying is whether they specifically know about those who have been hurt.
Or that could simply mean, we are all somebody's children. So in that sense, it may just mean kind of an expression of sympathy for family and loved ones. But the thing is, 19 dead, and whatever age it is, that is 19 people, way too many, 59 injured. Yeah. This is a massive attack. This is the worst attack on our shores, I think, since 7/7.
Well, I was saying this to Mike, that, you, in the midst of all of this, you have to put it in perspective, and it is it certainly will be one of the biggest in history in terms of the number of people who have died. We are thankful, as Scooter Braun goes on, for the selfless service tonight of Manchester's first responders who rushed towards danger to help save lives, because, as again we were talking earlier, when these things happen, and if you are caught up in them, you don't know. When people were being told to run because they were running away from the initial blast, they started to run in the opposite direction. You don't really know where you're running to.
In fact, there's a haunting song. Bruce Springsteen, as a response to 9/11, released a remarkable album called The Rising, which if you're a Springsteen fan, you'll know. And there's a song on that, Up the Stairs into the Fire. Yeah. And it's about the fire officers who had that amazing character, who were going up, and probably they knew to almost certain death in that case.
They knew the building was going to collapse. That's absolutely right. Yeah. Sometimes we read reports in one paragraph in our national newspapers here about 140 people being killed in a bomb explosion in somewhere in the Middle East or the Far East, and it flows off us like water off a duck's back. We've lost 19 people tonight in Manchester. And the effect on this country is, as you quite rightly said, enormous and appalling. But when you compare that to the numbers that sometimes happen in far-flung countries, it gives us the indication of the scale of the terrorist problem around the world. It's only when it comes to our shores, smacks us right in the face, that we start to think so deeply about this being a worldwide scourge.
And that's certainly what's going to happen on the show this morning over on Talk Radio. We're not going to be doing other stories, of course. We'll have our normal building blocks in, because, again, we can't let people completely usurp what we do, but we're going to have the very latest throughout the morning and be talking to people in Manchester, hearing from eyewitnesses. And also, if anybody wants to give us a call just to express sympathy, I mean, this is what's great about radio, isn't it? The remarkable thing is suddenly this is where you turn, because the papers are playing catch-up, TV is very unwieldy. We're hoping to get reporters live from the site throughout the morning.
Paul, thank you very much indeed. Paul Ross coming up with the full set breakfast from 6 o'clock. We're here, of course, until then. Alan Brazil will be along as well with the sports breakfast right here on Talk Sport.
Sure.
I suppose, as you were saying earlier, Mike, it's interesting as people wake up to the news of this terrible event that's happened overnight. They will discover perhaps more things at the site, and as the investigation goes on in the next couple of hours, which they may not have been able to discover for the period of the night, just simply because it's now light.
I'm sure they will. I mean, for instance, what happened to the old-fashioned thing, and I know nothing about criminology or police work, but what happened to the old-fashioned thing about roadblocks?
Yeah.
So, you know what I'm saying? So, the minute it goes off last night, do they still do these days what they would have done 20 or 30 years ago and put a police roadblock on every main artery out of Manchester? Do you see what I mean?
I do.
Because is it a gang, or is it a gang, or is it a one-man crime? Is it, you know, the terms become the lone wolf attack?
Yeah.
Where did he get his equipment from? Where did he store it all? Where did he make his bomb? All that's got to be known. Now,
I think one of the things that we've discovered, and I think I was kind of hinting at, I suppose, earlier, as far as the flow of information now. The flow of information is much slower now from the police to the general public via the press.
Yes.
Because I think there's a lot of things that they now know which we won't know until perhaps 2 or 3 days down the road.
Yeah.
For example, they will have known, presumably, whether or not there was a suicide bomb involved. They will therefore know whether there's anybody else to look for.
Well, they will by now, you would have thought.
Well, you would think they probably knew that fairly early on, you would imagine. Just because of the forensic techniques that they've got.
Sure.
So maybe that's why there didn't appear to be a massive sort of ring of steel going on to stop people from going anywhere, because maybe they knew there was nobody to go anywhere.
Yeah, no, it could well be the scene. I mean, you know, when you talk about how far-flung and what effect will it have on... I mean, the whole of Manchester will, in some way, have to be in sort of lockdown today because... they need to be on top of movements of people who might possibly have been here. I mean, years and years ago, you know, we were talking about the IRA attacks and all that. It wasn't just trying to find the people who perpetrated the attacks. It was trying to find the support team that had, you know, brought the explosives, that had transported them, that had planned getaway routes and all that kind of stuff. Now, that may or may not still be the situation, depending on the nature of the attacker. If he's a lone man, but a lot of terrorist experts will tell you that being a one-man terrorist attacking team is a very difficult operation.
Sure.
You know, you need in some way support for a venture like that because of sometimes because of the incredibly detailed knowledge you have to have of these things and how they work and how they do it, but also how you get yourselves into situations where you want to cause the most harm.
Yeah, and you wonder whether the timing of it is somehow been determined because of the fact that there is a big football match on, albeit that it's not going on in Manchester. Yeah. But Manchester United are, of course, in the final of the Europa League tomorrow night in Sweden. And, of course, it may well be that that's enough of a distraction, or was enough of a distraction initially, to allow this to happen.
Do you think that it would be a decent proposal to ask for a postponement of that game, the final on Wednesday night?
Well, you know, because I think if it was in Manchester, I would say yes.
Yeah.
I think because it's not in Manchester, I think you'd have to say no, let it go ahead.
The only thing I'm thinking is this. I'm thinking from a broad perspective point of view. Manchester is going to be the scene of appalling pictures and statistics over the next 48 hours in terms of the perpetration of this horrendous crime.
Yeah.
Then you go to the back page of the same newspaper and you see a picture of people in Manchester United shirts waving a trophy around and being very, very happy about it.
I mean, again,
it's
like,
the contrast.
Like what you said earlier about whether Ariana Grande should cancel her tour.
Yes.
I mean, you can see both sides of an argument.
Of course
to
you
either
can.
stop it or to let it go ahead. It's a very, very difficult one to judge, really.
Yes, of course it is.
It's a horrible choice to have to make, but I can see exactly what you mean.
Yeah, I mean, I'm the guys running Manchester United. I'm thinking, crikey, we're going off to seek European glory, and if we get it, we're going to be a very happy mob. And then they're going to come back. What happens if they've organised a victory parade?
Yeah.
In a city which has been utterly pulverised and devastated by one of the most horrendous terrorist attacks on English soil.
Yeah.
It's a tricky situation.
It really is. Absolutely right. We'll be bringing you more, of course, as we get it right here. We are the Two Mics. This is TalkSport. Many people, of course, who are experts in the field of terrorism are constantly having to kind of reset their rules for precisely what it is that now goes on out there and what is now called terrorism, because it changes more or less by the week, doesn't it?
But there are no rules in terrorism. I mean, that might sound like a preposterous thing to say, but there used to be rules in terrorism.
Well, I was going to say, I mean,
you used to know who the terrorists were.
You used to know that there were terrorist organisations, and that everyone was affiliated with one or the other.
Yes.
You all remember Baader-Meinhof, remember the IRA,
of course we do,
remember the PLO, you remember all of the organisations that used to, the Red Army, the Red Brigade, I should say.
That's right.
There were plenty of them. Baader-Meinhof, everybody knew who they were.
I mean, in a way, it's a different sort of terrorist altogether, because Baader-Meinhof were politically motivated. They wanted to change the world.
Well, I mean, all terrorist organisations supposedly are.
Well, yeah, but the feeling you get about the modern day terrorist, and particularly if we go on to this expression, the lone wolf, is that the lone wolf could be an unhappy person who's got a grudge against society, and that the best way for him to justify himself is to say, you think you can treat me dismissively, do you? Well, I'm going to show you, world.
Unfortunately, the way that some of these terrorism acts have now been sort of carried out have given sort of permission, if you like, or succour to some of these, crazy individuals who think, oh, look, I can now hang my hat on something.
That's right.
I can say Islam has made me suddenly believe in something, and I'm going to go blow somebody up, or I'm going to go run somebody over, or I'm going to go stab a few people, and I can do it in the name of a religion.
Utterly appalling. This one last night, we think, has probably involved young people, children, teenagers. I remember the day that the Dunblane story broke. The guy's name was Thomas Hamilton, thank you, yeah. And, of course, the appalling catalogue of murder against school children so horrified the world. But then the the details about this Thomas Hamilton started emerging. He was a very disturbed man.
Yeah.
He had strange attitudes towards children.
Yeah.
He was filming boys running around without their tops on, telling people
he was a bit of a gun nut as well.
This is all about physiology, making sure the boys' bodies are developing and all that. Some of the parents said, well, we don't like it, please stop it. Then he was asked not to associate himself with certain youth clubs again, all that kind of stuff. And in the end, he just became a kind of, oh, you think you can treat me like this, do you? And as you quite rightly say, a gun nut walks into a school, the rest is history. But that, unfortunately, has been the pattern of some of the, quotes, lone wolf terrorist attacks that we have sadly had to endure and suffer over the last 12 months.
Exactly right. And this one, we still don't know precisely what it was all about. We don't know how many people were involved. The police have not given any indication, although some of the papers are suggesting it may well have been a suicide attack. We don't know that. We will bring you the news only as and when it becomes available. We are the Two Mics.
The Two Mics, simulcast across the UK on Talk Sport and Talk Radio.
This is Talk Sport. We are the Two Mics. We've been here throughout the course of the night, and there have been some terrible, revelations that have come mostly from the eyewitnesses who described what they heard, what they saw, and you'll be able to read an awful lot of that, I suppose, online if you wish to. A lot of the pictures that have already been published online, and a lot of the pictures which we saw last night on video show quite a lot of young people, quite a lot of terror, What they don't really show are the scale of the injuries which are being described by many of the.
Well, presumably those people injured will have been taken away.
Yeah.
But somebody's badly injured by debris from a bomb that contains nuts and bolts.
Yeah.
They ain't going to be walking around anywhere. We saw what I suppose you could call the lucky ones, who were able to walk out of the arena, having been on what appears to have been the edge of the blast.
Yeah.
Because whilst they physically didn't appear to be bleeding and all that, it was the typical remnants of being on the edge of an explosion. All their clothes were torn, and young girls coming out with their tights melted sort of on their leg and that sort of thing, you know. And as I say, they are, quotes, the lucky ones, because the one thing we haven't had is any indication yet whatsoever of the nature of the victims. We know that there was a huge proportion of the 21,000 people inside the Manchester Arena last night, the MEN, were youngsters, and we don't know how young, and we don't know how many.
Sure.
Teenagers, maybe even younger than teenagers. But we do also now know that there is a terrific amount of traffic on social media from distressed parents trying to find out where their children are, because the children were whisked away to one or two locations away from the scene when their parents couldn't get there to pick them up. So there's a social media frenzy going on now between parents whose children they were supposed to pick up and they can't find, and children who themselves are, struggling to be reunited with their parents.
Sure. Although we understand that some of that may have happened over the course of the last couple of hours with two hotels in particular, the Holiday Inn Express and the Premier Inn near the arena, actually reuniting some people. So let's hope that continues. What we also know is that Ian Hopkins is the Chief Constable of Manchester Police. A couple of hours ago, he made this statement.
We received reports of an explosion at Manchester Arena in the city centre. This was at the conclusion of the Ariana Grande concert. Currently, we have 19 people confirmed to have lost their lives in the explosion and around 50 casualties that are being treated at 6 hospitals across Greater Manchester. My thoughts are very much with those that have been injured and lost their lives and their loved ones at this terrible time. We are doing all that we can to support them. Officers from Greater Manchester Police and Emergency Services are working at the scene and are supporting those affected. We are coordinating the operation here at Greater Manchester Police Headquarters. An emergency number is available for all those concerned about their loved ones or anyone who may have been in the area. The number is 0161 856 9400. We are currently treating this as a terrorist incident until we have further information. We are working closely with National Counter-Terrorism Policing Network and UK intelligence partners. This is clearly a very concerning time for everyone. We're doing all that we can, working with local and national agencies to support those affected as we gather information about what happened last night. As you will understand, we are still receiving information and updates, so we'll provide further detail when we have a clearer picture. I want to thank people for their support and would ask them to remain vigilant, and if they have any concerns at all, to report them to the National Anti-Terrorist Hotline. The number is 0800 789 321. It is important also that people here in Manchester avoid the area around Manchester Arena so that emergency services can continue to effectively deal with the incident at that location.
That's Ian Hopkins there, the Chief Constable of Manchester Police. The number he was giving out there for information is 0161 856 9400. And if you've got any information about terrorism or about concerns you may have about terrorism, the terrorism hotline number is 0800 789 321. They've also issued this message to people who might need help or assistance. Anyone who needs help or assistance after last night's incident at Manchester Arena, help is available at the Etihad Stadium Access Gate 11. So that's at the Etihad Stadium Access Gate 11.
That's Manchester City's...
It is. I'm not quite sure how close that is to the arena itself. Also, British Transport Police have issued this statement. As the public would expect in response to an incident such as this, extra officers have been on patrol and will be at key railway stations as well as on trains around the country. Throughout the day, commuters can expect to see additional officers on their journey. This will include both armed and unarmed officers. My officers are there to reassure concerned members of the public, and we'd ask people to remain vigilant and report any suspicious behaviour by calling the anti-terrorist hotline, which, as I said, is 0800 789 123.
The shock and, or what do they call it, shock and awe when you have an attack like this, which really rocks the world. This has rocked our world this morning, and you and I are just sort of winding up, Mike. Other people will just now be getting up and switching on. The full horror of what's going to happen is going to sink in, and they're going to get to know about it over the next few minutes. And this country, the United Kingdom, Great Britain, is going to be truly appalled at the devastation and the terror that's been inflicted upon us overnight. And we're going to be a very united country today. There's no doubt about that.
I think so. Let's have a listen to witness Jenny Brewster. She was at the arena last night when it all happened. Here's what she told Sky News.
It was distressing. I took my daughter of 11. This was her first concert. We went. We had a great night. And as Ariana Grande was singing her last song, which was Dangerous Woman, my daughter was tired and she needed the bathroom, and she said, "Can we just go outside now?" And so we did. We went to the bathroom, and then we said, "Let's go now before the rush." So we walked towards where the MEN car park is, where we were parked, and there was a row of stewards stood in a line, stopping us getting through, but they were very friendly, and they said, "This isn't your best way, girls. You're best turning round, and you can get to your car park that way." As I turned round, boom, one loud noise, and then we, so for the first 10 seconds, we thought about it, and we just walked with haste, and then a gentleman said, "Run!" So we ran, and we walked down we walked quickly down the stairs. That's when people were flooding through the concert doors, and the sound was definitely coming from the main foyer, where the guests normally enter through and present their tickets. On exiting the building, we then saw crowds of people and children devastated. We went to the car, which was 10 seconds away. As soon as we got to the car, you could smell the burning. Coming out then was quite a fluid operation. There were people around us. The children were devastated. We could see police running in front of our car, people, emergency services with huge red backpacks on them, running into the building. But we did manage to get away, all within about 3 or 4 minutes. But it was devastating.
One of the witnesses last night describing what she saw at the end of that Ariana Grande concert.
And that was a very graphic description.
It really was.
I mean, she almost sort of said that if they hadn't taken notice of the stewards, they might have walked closer to the seat of the explosion, you know.
Exactly.
Did she say how old her little girl was there? Because I was listening for that, but I didn't catch it.
No, she didn't.
Because I'm trying to gauge exactly what the age profile of the audience was last night.
Yeah, I think probably as young as 10 or 11, possibly.
You think so? That young?
Yeah, very
I mean, do parents take their kids at 10, 11 to concerts like that?
Definitely.
Yeah?
Definitely.
Well,
it's when they get a bit older, they let them go on their own.
It's even more disturbing.
That's the thing.
The Two Mics.
This is Talk Sport. We are the Two Mics. Lots more to come, of course. Over on Talk Radio, it's going to be Paul Ross with the full sets at breakfast. Mr. Parry, thank you very much. It's not been an easy evening.
No.
And I'm sure that there will be more news unfolding as the hours unfold right here throughout the course of the day.
Well, as you say, Al's coming up very shortly, Al in Brazil, Mickey Quinn. I'm going to stick around for a few minutes as they open their show just to help to bridge the information that's been available throughout the night and just get the situation sorted as it is now.
Sure. What we know is that 19 people have been confirmed killed. by this bomb that went off last night around about 10:30 outside the Manchester Arena. There is assistance for anybody who needs it. If you're looking for help, you go to the Etihad Stadium and it's gate 11. Also, there are all sorts of helplines being put out by Manchester Police, of course, and as well, in the meantime, we will be filling you in with all the injuries that we know of. As far as the numbers at the moment, about 60 people have been taken to hospital. We hope and we believe that many of the children who were not, in fact, united with many of their parents have now been united with their parents, so that we know precisely what is going on there. But a terrible, terrible night, and we'll keep you updated throughout the course of the day as the news unfolds.
The Two Mics, simulcast across the UK on Talk Sport and Talk Radio.